In the Sangita Ratnakara, you have a raga called Turushka Todi. Turushka is Turkish. So Turushka, if you can have something Turushka, what is the problem? In Carnatic music, you have a raga called Hejjuji. Hijaz comes from Persian origins. So that is 300 years ago. In Carnatic music tradition, you have compositions inspired by the British bands. What do you notice? Does this have British influence or not? But so we have several treatises or Sangita Shastra, as we say in Odia, several Sangita Shastras composed in Odisha, right from the 12th century, because Jayadeva's Gita Govinda is in itself considered a treatise as per traditionalists in Odisha. So from Jayadeva's Gita Govinda, and then we have a bulk of works written by the native musicians of Odisha, one among whom is Krishnadasa Badajana Mahapatra. You see a recent illustration of him in the Patachitra style by Bhubaneswar Pattnaik here. Eni kyoni radheni ki areni kyoni radheni ki areni kyoni radhe eniki.
समस्त नमस्कार, जय जगन्नाथ। आज कलिंग इतिहास एक आभासी बैठक को समस्त को स्वागत। आज आम सहित अच्छा आम समस्त अति आदर प्रतीक पट्टनायक ओडिया नुआ पीढ़ी किछिटा ना जोड़ा वर्तमान सबु चिंताशील व्यक्ति मानक नखदर्पण मुख अगर अच्छी भर प्रतीक यही बयस गोटे बही लिखि सारी आहरी किसी बही प्रकाशन हवा अवकाश अच्छी। बहुत जल्दी किसी नुआ बही से भेटिदेवे आमको। प्रतीक जदिओ ओडिसी संगीत एक विशेषज्ञ रूपे बर्तमान जनाशुना। प्रतीक भाषा ज्ञान, प्रतीक संस्कृति ज्ञान, प्रतीक इतिहास प्रेम विषय ऐतिह्य प्रेम विषय आम समस्ते अल्पे बहुते जानीचे। बेसी समय नष्ट न करी प्रतीक को अनुरोध करी, प्रतीक दयाकोरी आज विषय सम्यक सूचना दे आपण आज कार्यक्रम आगो को नियंतु। धन्यवाद। परफेक्ट।
अच्छा हो, ठीक अछि। So I brought quite a lot of visual material for this talk, and we intend to do it in English because I've done similar talks in Odia earlier, but for a broader audience, this talk is meant to be in English, although most talks in this series converse freely between Odia and English. So I'll do the same, but please ask at any point in the chats or anything if you feel something is left out at any point. So we are talking about Odissi music. At this point, I should outright mention that I sing, I play the veena. My guru is Pandita Ramarao Patra. Before him, Guru Brundavana Khandwala, and before him, my first guru is my own grandmother, Srimati Kanaklata Sapat. So we come from a family in South Odisha that has had some amount of singing within the family. So with that, I will often refer back to the local practices in our part of Odisha and the practices that I've seen during my field research. So this is meant to be a holistic talk on Odissi music as a whole. Therefore, we will touch upon multiple points, but only briefly. I'm not bothering to go into things in great detail or talk about aspects such as technical points and aesthetics and all that. So I'll stick to the core essential information that you must know about Odissi music, both in terms of what is the history of the form, what is the repertoire, what the form itself is, what is its present day scenario, and broadly speaking, who are the people who keep this form alive. That's what we'll be covering. Typically, when we start, we often go back to the Hatigumpha inscription. In many cultural aspects of Odisha, this inscription is significant because it is 1st or 2nd century BC, immediately after the Ashokan inscriptions at Jaugada and Dhauli. This is the inscription of Samrat Kharavela. well known as a great ruler of ancient India. The point of bringing this inscription is that at this point of time, we have another contemporary source, which is the Natya Shastra by Bharata Muni, which is considered the cornerstone of all Indian performing arts, music, dance, theatre, all of that. So Bharata Muni in his Natya Shastra, which is variously dated between 500 BCE to 500 CE, but we can take it roughly around the 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE. So that's roughly 2000 years ago. 2000 years ago, in this inscription, in Hatigumpha inscription of Kharavela, the king refers to himself, that is Kharavela refers to himself as Gandharva Veda Buddha. Gandharva Veda, the Veda of the Gandharvas or Gandharva, which is a term that is used for singing. It's solely used for music. It is considered to be the ancestor of Indian classical music as it exists today. It's a much older form. It has different conventions and different ways of functioning, which are quite archaic. And there was a significant, there's a significant change in the general approach observed from sometime, say, from the 7th, 8th, 10th centuries, from that time afterwards. So there is this pre-Sangita Ratnakara, which is a 12th, 13th century text. So the Sangita Ratnakara marks a transition point. There's a post-Sangita Ratnakara period in which we live, and this Gandharva Veda is the pre-Sangita Ratnakara period. So Kharavela, despite being a king, he boasts about his martial achievements and all that, but he makes particular note that he encouraged not only musicians and dancers, but he himself was adept in the Gandharva Veda, in the arts of singing. And in the Udayagiri and Khandagiri caves of Bhubaneswar, where this inscription is located, you find a great deal of sculptures depicting dance as well as music in the shape of harps. So I won't go too much into that. Harps were one of the older instruments. And the contemporary source, Bharata Muni, that we are talking about, in the Natya Shastra, he mentions 4 stylistic divisions in the Indian subcontinent, which is Abanti, Panchali, Dakshinatya, Udra, Magadhi. In this, the word Udra refers to Odissi. So Odissi music, being the classical traditional music of the state of Odisha, was referred to by multiple names in the past. Just like the Odia language was also referred to as Utkali, Kalingi, Udra, Prakruta, etc. Odissi music was also referred to by these multiple names, which are just geographical adjectives of the varying names of Odisha over the past. And this is roughly touching upon history. As you can see, the sculpture and the manuscript tradition of Odisha is a very rich source of tracing back what music must have been like in the 10th, 12th century, because that's all this is the only record. Since music is an art that cannot be visually captured, therefore this is the visual remnant of that period. In Konarka and in the great temple of Lingaraja and Jagannatha, of course, we know the temples, right from the earliest temples to the multiple temples that are built in the 7th to 12th, 13th century period. That's the period probably in which the most number of temples were built. That period, you will find a lot of these sculptures in each of the temples depicting music and dance. So the first and the second images that here you can see are a veena. So here we get introduced to the forms in which the music expresses itself. It is primarily a solo vocal music. But then there is the group singing tradition which exists till today in the Puri temple tradition. And then there are the other sevas. Instruments in the Indian treatises are classified into 4 types: Tata, Anadha, Susira, Ghana. So Tata is the instrument which is a string instrument. So you can see the Bina is the primal string instrument which persists till today. Then you can see the Mardala, and if you see the image to the extreme right, you can see the Mardala, which is the unique percussive instrument of the state of Odisha. And then the distinct way in which he's sitting with one Mardala below his feet and one vertically placed. This posture is still seen today. In South Odisha, in the art form of Prahalada Nataka, you will see people sitting like this with 2 Mardalas. And you will see this in Sakhinato, you will see this in Bharata Lila. So this is a very common posture of handling the Mardala. So that is the instrument in the repertoire. You can see the Bina, and then there is Bongsi, which is the Sushira or the wind instrument. you can see anodhar, the charmabruta instrument, that which has a membrane to play upon percussion. And then there are metallic instruments such as koratala, jhanja, gini, all that. So Odissi dance has counterpart poses for all of them. Odishan sculpture also has equivalent poses for each of them, and they identify them with these old names. What is more interesting is that the Jagannatha temple of Puri has 4 kinds of essential music instrumental sevas, of which there are instruments of all these 4 classes. Then there is the Gayani, which is the singer, and then there is the dancer, which you can see in this palm leaf, where this illustrated Chitraputhi tradition, very rich in Odisha, palm leaf tradition. Here also you can see the artist always takes care to illustrate these multiple types of string instruments, because that's what completes the depiction of music according to in the painting tradition. The temple of Jagannatha, which is central to everything in Odisha. So these sevas have been part of the tradition of the Puri temple. So ritually every night the Devadasis would sing. These are the last 2 Gayanis, Kokila Prabha Mahari and Parasamani Mahari, who were singers essentially. The essential part of their repertoire was the Gita Govinda. So Jayadeva's Gita Govinda, written in the 12th century, was compulsorily sung during the Bada Singhara or the nighttime ritual of Lord Jagannatha. So he will listen to Odissi music when he sleeps. And then he will also look at the dance. Just Sasimani Devadasi, you must have seen the last surviving Devadasi, used to dance. And Kokila Prabha and Parasamani Mahari used to sing. So they sung in the typical Puri temple tradition. So music was traditionally seen like all other things in Odisha. Music was seen as primarily a mode of service. And apart from temples, courts also acted as places of patronage. All the courts of South Odisha, for that matter, when other parts of Odisha fell to Mughal rule, the area that was known as Mughal Bandi, parts of South Odisha remained relatively unaffected due to their isolation by virtue of the density of mountains and forests. Therefore, in South Odisha, the patronage continued for a longer time. And in the temple of Jagannatha, not only inside the temple, music is also performed outside the temple in the rituals of Chandana Jatra and Jhulana Jatra and all that. There will be a moving party, and we have excellent descriptions of all this. For example, in the 16th, 17th century, Dina Krishna says, Kavi Dina Krishna Dasa of Baleswar, he mentions in his songs describing the Chandana Jatra, Mahari Karanti Natta in front of. So there are people walking to the Narendra Sarovar during the daytime and during the night time, which is a scene that you see even today, with torches in their hands. In the procession led by Maharis who pave the way for the arriving deities on top of a Bimana. That is the moving scene that is captured in the compositions of Puri. That being the history part, more or less covered with the sculptural depictions, the Hatigumpha and the manuscript tradition. So we have roughly covered the period of, say, from the 3rd century BC to the 15th century, which is the bulk of the sculptural material, so tangible heritage. Then there is the other part. There is the living repertoire, and then there is also the textual treatises that bind this tradition. So we have several treatises or Sangita Shastra, as we say in Odia, several Sangita Shastras composed in Odisha right from the 12th century, because Jayadeva's Gita Govinda is in itself considered a treatise as per traditionalists in Odisha. So from Jayadeva's Gita Govinda, and then we have a bulk of works written by the native musicians of Odisha, one among whom is Krishnadasa Badajana Mahapatra. You see a recent illustration of him in the Pattachitra style by Bhubaneswar Pattnaik here. Krishnadasa has authored the text called Gita Prakasa sometime in the 16th century. He was a contemporary of Gajapati Mukunda Deva. He was the court musician of Gajapati Mukunda Deva. The text is called Gita Prakasa. It is the single most important text in the Odissi music tradition as far as the regional tradition and regional treatises are concerned. And Krishnadasa makes many novel announcements, as well as points out or notes down several features that are unique to the Odissi music school of singing. In that, he mentions different names of the 22 Shrutis, which is a striking thing, because the 22 Shrutis in the Sangita Ratnakara have been named, and these are pan-Indian things. And here Krishnadasa violates that by stating the local tradition. And then there are different names for the Murchanas as well. The 7 Murchanas of the 3 grammars. This is quite technical. So Sarjagrama, Madhyamagrama, Gandharagrama. There are scale or note series which are called Murchanas, and each of them have their own names, and this is linked to the earlier Vedic tradition, because the Murchanas and the Tanas were used in the Vedic traditions, and it was believed, just like in the Vedic traditions, it is believed that sound is superior. In the Nigama tradition, sound is superior, therefore sound has to be reproduced accurately. When sound is reproduced accurately, just as the gods have revealed it, then anything can happen. You can make it rain, or there will be offspring, or you can reduce natural calamities and all that. So you can do basically anything by paying attention to sound very closely. That is why the Vedic oral traditions insist on a very rigorous method of training spread over decades, in order to ensure that the oral text is transmitted with extreme precision, almost losslessly. In that sense, the Vedic tradition is one of the oldest, you can say, a sound recording comparable to the Gregorian chants or something like that. So the Vedic tradition, Odisha is very rich in that it has all the 4 Veda tradition recitation. So the Rig Veda, as you know, the Govardhana Pitha in Puri, the Purvamnaya Shankaracharya Pitha, is exclusively dedicated to the Rig Veda. Then we have a very rich Jajurveda tradition. The Kanva Shakha of the Jajurveda is practiced widely in this belt, in the coastal belts of Odisha. The Atharva Vedic Paipalada tradition, which was almost considered lost all over India in the Vedic studies, was refound in Odisha in some time in the 1960s, because nobody had bothered to look here. So the entire Atharva Vedic corpus with texts that were considered to be lost, and a poor copy of which was found in Kashmir, an excellent manuscript was found in Odisha with a living recitation tradition, which is still being researched right now. There are recordings. I would have loved to make you listen to all that, but that's a huge, entirely different thing. So probably I can share links and you can listen to that if you want. There are over 20 hours of recordings of the Atharva Veda Paipalada Shakha, which is uniquely rooted to Odisha. So the Vedas have their shakhas, or they have branches, you can say. Some branches are localized, so they are typical to certain regions of India. It is in that same manner that there are these Utkaliya shakhas, or what is called as Utkala Patha, the Utkaliya method of singing or reciting, which is closely allied with the Odissi music tradition. So we have covered Rig Veda, Jajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. Then there is the Samavedic tradition, very rich in South Odisha. In South Odisha, practically any Brahmin you will encounter will belong to the Samavedic tradition, which is significant because the Samaveda is considered the fountainhead of the music of India. So it's obvious that the local Samavedic recitation tradition has something in overlap with the local singing tradition. It is in light of that I'm pointing this out. The Samavedic tradition, unfortunately, is on the brink of extinction. With that out of the way, the Vedas are considered at least 3,000 to 4,000 years old. So those are probably the oldest recording kind of things that we can find in tradition. Back to Krishnadasa, the other treatises belonging to, say, 1650 Sangita Narayana, authored by the king of Paralakemundi, in association with his guru Kaviratna Purushottama Mishra, writing with Gajapati Sarvagya Jagannatha Narayana Deva, 1650. Sangita Narayana is also one of the primary texts. The Sangita Narayana is often cited in, for example, how these treatises would integrate with the practical tradition is that these treatises would be quoted. For example, in my Guru Parampara, the Sangita Narayana was considered the definition of anything. So today is a class in the old system of teaching. If today is a class, the Guru will begin the class by citing the Sangita Narayana in Sanskrita, translating it to Odia, then further demonstrating the subject. So that was the traditional pedagogical method, which was preserved in certain lineages across various parts of Odisha. So that being Gita Prakasha, Sangita Narayana, then there are several others like Sangita Muktabali, Sangita Kalpalatika, Sangita Sarani, Then there are Odia texts also, like Gita Prakasa Boli, Sangita Sara Boli. The Sangita Sara of Harinayaka, written before Krishnadasa, was considered important by Krishnadasa's time. So that was one of the important texts even before that. But unfortunately, the full text has not been located and published till now. What all this reflects is that even in a small region like Odisha, if we go to the earlier boundaries, of course, it's a much bigger area, bigger region. We had a wealth of the scholarship tradition. So the musical tradition cannot be documented visually, therefore you will have to write treatises and technical treatises on top of that. Therefore, these people have produced an overwhelming number of local Utkaliya or Odishan musical treatises. Considering the size of the region, it's quite a significant output. And all of them are saying the same thing. There is very little contradiction between two texts. So they generally agree on what is being there. And from the texts, we know something very peculiar, that there was this system of ancient Indian music called the Grama Murchana system, which was a native Indian method of identifying, deciphering, and codifying scales of music, essentially the precursors of ragas. So ragas were codified using this Grama Murchana Paddhati, which fell out of use in most parts of India by the 15th century, say. Why scholars think this is because of the Islamic invasions and the influence of Persian music, non-Indian subcontinent music, basically. That led to a change in what is called the Thaat system, or the modern way of codifying the ragas. This change was it was a change that took a lot of time. It took some 200-300 years to percolate into all parts of India. And it was also a change that was quite a deviation from the traditional Indian method of codifying. The treatises of Odisha reveal that even until 1900s, they did not leave the old method. Even in 1940, we had Pandits in Odisha who were using the Grama Murchana system. Even now, we have people who are capable of understanding the Grama Murchana system, although they are primarily practical musicians. They are not theorists. For example, Pandit Gopal Chandra Panda maintains the knowledge of the Grama Murchana system, which has been passed down in some lineages in parts of Odisha, which is a great deal, because in the 15th century, you find that receding in most parts of India. By the 17th century, you see it has almost faded away from all parts of India. And Odisha, being this conservative region, as it is in all other aspects, for example, the Pattachitra tradition still does not have perspective, which is a big thing, because they were quite exposed to perspective and shading and hatching. But the Pattachitra tradition is very conservative in that it does not depict perspective. It sticks to the profile depiction of faces and all that. So you can observe this very conservative character in all the art forms of Odisha. They prefer to stay in the past rather than in the present. And even if contemporary, they have this unique approach where they will take the contemporary back to the past. So that approach is observed in several aspects of Odissi music, the treatises being one of them. And this is a Ragamala painting. This is the earliest palm leaf manuscript, one of the earliest palm leaf manuscripts in the collection of the State Museum. I hope my slides are visible. Can somebody please confirm?
No, Prateek, we can't see your slides right now.
You can't see the slides? Okay.
No.
I thought it was visible all along. Now it is, right?
Yeah.
I hope you did not miss some of the earlier things that I showed.
Like yeah, this was the last slide we saw.
Okay.
B.B. Pattnaik sirs, and now this is the one.
And this is the Ragamala painting tradition. This is again harkening back to the old pedagogy thing. In the early days, musicians of Odisha were taught ragas, and they had to take these images of the ragas, which were depicted as these Pattachitra deities. So they were deified and depicted as human-like images like this. And this chitra was considered a form of a meditative tool for the musician. And the chitrakara was supposed to listen to the musician and draw this. And this raga patti tradition has receded. Earlier, it was a very rich tradition, like this early, very bright, pigment-laden depiction of the ragas, Madhava, Ramakeri, Madhasri, and another one that you can see. This is not in the Odisha State Museum. This is in an international collection. So this raga chitra tradition directly ties in with the Pattachitra tradition of Odisha. So these are very closely tied. I will end with just one more detail, the technical part. The history and all is very clear that the instruments are different, the style of singing is different, and that the repertoire itself is different by virtue of several things, such as that it is sung, the lyrics are in Odia and Sanskrita also, that which is peculiar to the Odia dialect of Sanskrita, you can say, Sanskrita as it was spoken in Odisha. And then you have the influence of the local Vedic tradition. Then you have the difference in names and all that the treatises encode. So we have hopefully made way until the 1650s and 1700s with the treatise tradition. The most essential difference, in fact, is clarified by history, but it is a practical difference after all, because it is music is a performing art. And that is, there are 15 gamakas in the Odissi music tradition as per the treatises. Panchadasa gamaka is what we say. The Panchadasa gamakas have several, first of all, the listing of the 15 gamakas, their names and their prayoga itself is different from the other traditions. On top of that, there is this gamaka or musical motif is the best way I can translate it. It's a particular musical thing to do. It's a function on a note. In science language, it's a, if a note is a fixed frequency, it is a function that is applied on the note. So then there is this gamaka called the Andolita gamaka, which is in course of my conversations with Pattachitra artist Sri Bibhu Pattnaik, Bibhu Bhaina, the Lahara Dhadi of Pattachitra, this sinusoidal wave that you see in the top paintings, incidentally these dhadis or borders are illustrated by Guru Benudhar Mahapatra, one of the senior most and one of the maestros of the Pattachitra tradition. He's around 85 today as we speak. This Lahara Dhadi is allied with the Andolita Gamaka of the Odissi music tradition. I'll explain. For example, the notes, if we sing the swaras plainly, sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa, sa ni dha pa ma ga re sa. I hope my voice is audible and Zoom is not cutting it off in the noise reduction thing. But the thing is, the straight notes when sung are sa ni dha pa ma ga re sa. What we do in the Odissi music tradition is, on this straight note, we do the Andolita gamaka as a function, we apply it on top, which the product that it gives is sa ni dha pa ma ga re sa. So this action is known as the Andolita. So sa ni dha pa, this is dui guna or double. Sa ni dha pa ma ga re sa. This is what characterizes Odissi music, because this is not found in the other traditions of music at all. And when encountered, it is not exactly this, and it is not as frequently used as it is in the Odissi tradition. For example, this Lahara Dhadi, as you can see, the visual counterpart, perhaps you are able to correlate. If you use a pitch time graph, the Andolita Gamaka will translate to this Lahara Dhadi. So, sa, this motive, this wavy, swinging character, Andolita, incidentally in Odia relates to the word Dola, which is the swinging motion. Dolaiva. Our gurus, especially my sir, Acharya Tarini Charana Patra, used to say Dolaila, Dholi Goti ko Andolita. That is how the traditional Odia definition was handed out. Dolaila Bhalya Goti. Sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. If you look at any Odissi song, you will notice this motif will be present somewhere or the other, and it will be the dominant motif. It is just like the Tribhangi is the dominating motif in the Odissi dance or even in Odishan sculpture. So that curvy character, the tendency to avoid hard edges and round it off is seen, and the rounding off, the exact curvature of the rounding off and the radius of the rounding off is considered paramount. So that is where the expertise of an Odissi musician lies. The ability to execute the curve with the exact desired amount of curvature and radius. That is the closest visual counterpart example that I can give to translate the musical motif. Below what you see is called the Kurula Gamaka. The Kurula word relates with the word Kurula or Kurala, which refers to the potter. According to Adiguru Singari Syamasundara of Puri, this Kurula Gamaka is a precession on two axes. So there is the potter's wheel that is rotating on this axis, and it is also wobbling around like this. So that is what it is compared with. The Kurula Gamaka is compared with this dhadi that I was just showing, the Golei dhadi of the Patachitra tradition. So it's rounding off, it's circles that are entwined and knotted together. It sounds something like this. Sa this rega repa ma pa ga ma rega sa. Now to demonstrate this in a practical song. Gupate sinamu simu tote pocharili is an andolita. Boli podi varu. This is a kurula. Byothare re. This is an andolita. Songato. This is a kurula. Golani to gola kotha la kotha re songato golani to gola kotha. So the final terminal place is always knotted off with these round edges. That is the tendency of Odissi music. This is the technical differentiator from the other musical traditions of India. With this much in mind, I'll move to the practical repertoire. And you can see the same curvilinear thing in the Patachitra painting tradition. And even when there is not an explicit circle, the depiction of the curvature of even the trees, something that should be quite straight, even there is a curvature to that. And in the elemental sketches, you can observe this more clearly. So that curvilinear tendency is something that is found in all aspects of Odisha. For example, the Odia script itself. Now for the repertoire, what do we sing? We sing songs that are called prabandhas. It is called a prabandha because prakrushta rupena bandha, that which is bandha or tied neatly, tied by the constraints of raga, tala, chanda and all that. So because it is tied, it is considered sophisticated music compared to other forms of music. Even in the tradition, there was the recognition of this. The constraint, working despite a constraint was considered a sign of excellence. And these constraints are laid by the what is called Purvacharya. The Acharyas of yore have laid down these constraints by virtue of what? By virtue of Desa Parampara, by virtue of the local tradition and what comes naturally to people. So what Bharata Muni is referring to as Udramagati, he is calling it Prabruti. So it is in the blood of the people to sing this Andolita, to sing this Kurula, to do this in the curved manner. It is a typical regional tendency of Odisha. That is, it's not something that has been made or has been specifically created. It is something that has evolved naturally over centuries of evolution, and then it has just been codified in this manner. The earliest parts of the repertoire that we sing are in fact the Charjapadas, which are a group of Buddhist Mahasiddha songs composed from the 5th to the 10th centuries, and some are later. Many of these Mahasiddhas belonged to Odisha and were Odia. Therefore, their songs are set to specific ragas. They have mentioned ragas. They are some of the earliest songs that mention proper raga. And these songs mention the ragas that are quite unique to Odissi music. For example, Malasri Gouda, which is still sung today. The same thing we see in the compositions of Kabiraja Jayadeva, who wrote the Gita Govinda, songs of which are called Ashtapadi, but Jayadeva also uses the word Prabandha. Jayadeva Kavi Prabandham, which he says in the text itself. So in these Prabandhas, what he does is he mentions the raga and the tala. So he's binding it by melody and rhythm, which are some of the earliest examples of songs where both these requirements, essential requirements, have been clearly notified by the composer himself. So he's not just writing the lyric, he's writing the lyric intended for a song. He's writing a song and he's himself the composer, as in the traditional conception all over India. Composers were called Bak Gayokara. So he who does the Bak. Bak is the lyric part, and Gayo, that is the melodic part and the rhythmic part. The Bak Gayokara, the person who binds together the lyric, the melody, and the rhythm, all of that together. So Jayadeva is one of the earliest Bhagyakaras, and he enjoys a great deal of popularity all over India. Here also, if you see the ragas that Jayadeva has used, for example, Mangala Gujjari and Ramakeri and Gujjari, Desakhya, all these ragas that Jayadeva uses are exclusive to the Odishan music tradition. The talas are also interesting because he mentions talas such as Ekotali, which is something that is known across villages even today. It's a very common thing. And then he mentions talas like Jati, Ashtatali. And that you will observe in the Gita Govinda singing that is practiced in Odisha traditionally. For example, in the temple of Puri during the Vadasinghara ritual, Hari Srita Kamala Pucha Mandala Dhruta Kundala Dhruta Kundala Kalita Lalita Vanamala Hari Kalita Lalita Vanamala Jaya Jaya Deva Hare Jaya Jaya Deva. There is something about this native treatment, the way the melody and the rhythm and the meter is handled, that just falls into place. This is not observed in all parts of India. It doesn't fall into place like that everywhere else. This composite nature, that it blends in so well with the music of Odisha and with the percussion of Odisha and with the dance of Odisha, the sculpture of Odisha and all that. That is a feature that itself identifies by virtue of the musicological aspects that Jayadeva's text is firmly rooted in the music tradition of the state, which is an obvious thing to happen. Similarly, many compositions are still sung in the original raga tala that Jayadeva has himself notified. For example, the song Kuru Jadunandana Chandana Sisira Tarena. Pada sa ni da pa pa ma ga re sa Kuru Jadunandana Chandana Sisira Tarena Karena Payo Dhare Kuru Jadunandana Mrugamada Patra Kamatra Mano Bhava Mangala Kalasa Sahodare Nijagada Sa Jadunandane Kridati Hrudayanandane Kuru Jadu. This was sung in the tradition of Gunupur by Pandit Raghunath Panigrahi. He used to sing this. His father had collected it from earlier singers. And this is set in the Raga Ramakeri and the Tala Jati, which is exactly what Jayadeva writes in his texts, which is a remarkable thing. If you see in most parts of India, if you see the dominant popular repertoire dates back to 300 years at max, which is also the case in Odisha. But then we have this significant popular part of the repertoire that is 800 years old, not just 800 years old, but obeying the direct indications of the poet or composer himself. That's a big deal. That is one. Then we have other compositions. The 13th century, 14th century. Jayadeva himself has written a few songs in Odia which are still sung in the Puri tradition. Kahoi Jayadeva Ninda Safala Eva Au Moname Bongsi Bojana Re Kahoi Jayadeva Ninda Safala Eva Au mo name bangsi, au mo name bangsi, bojana, bojana, bojana bajibo, bhusha podo, rajibo jugolo re, ajo borojo, rajo boronare. So for this song to be sung, this composition of Jayadeva in the Raga Ananda Bhairavi and Ekatali, to be sung in a place where he is known to have lived, in Puri, is a remarkable thing, and to be preserved in the temple tradition where he is known to have sung in the temple. And there are things like that. So the oldest Odia songs date back to 12th century, 13th century as well. And this is in perfectly understandable modern Odia. Then we have, there is this contemporary or even older tradition. There is this side-by-side parallel tradition of the Puranas being sung. So Sarala Dasa's Mahabharata or the works of the Panchasakha, Balarama Dasa, Atibadi Jagannatha Dasa, Mahapurusha Achyutananda Dasa, Jasovanta Dasa, Sisu Ananta Dasa, the Panchasakha, who wrote so much of literature in Odia. They translated the Bhagavata into Odia. They wrote the Ramayana in Odia. Sarala Dasa, of course, had already written in the 15th century the entire Mahabharata in Odia. And then these texts that they wrote, the Harivangsha, translated by Achyuta Mahapurusha, they did a great thing. They translated it in simple Odia and they used the core aspects, motifs of Odissi music in order to make the text accessible, because it was an oral tradition. People had to listen. So you will notice even now in the Bhagavata Tungis, there is the tradition of singing the very simple, elegant Nabakhyari meter in various tunes changing it. And in there you will notice reflections of the Vedic tradition. And there you will notice the very subtle core aspects that are fundamentally distinctive characteristics of the Odissi music tradition. That is my point of bringing them into this discussion. For example, the Bhagavata is sung Govinda, 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 Padugaduchi Makaranda, Se Makaranda, Panakari, Ele Torile Brojana. Typically, this will be sung in a much higher pitch so that people can listen. So, Govinda, 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 Padugaduchi Makaranda. This was traditionally sung by the Purana Panda class of Odisha. So herein you will notice the core ragas, you will notice the prevalence of the Adatali, which is a unique swingy rhythm of Odissi music that is quite unique and not found elsewhere. The 4/3 meter pattern and just the way the words are broken up, divided. Similarly so for the Purana tradition, the Chauda Akhyari Purana tradition that is still found in the art forms of Palla, Daskatya, even the temples it is sung in any Osa or anything you go in an Odia home, they will be singing it. The Lakshmi Purana, for example, that is still sung in houses. The tune in which it is sung is essentially a tune belonging to a very ancient class of tunes because it is prevalent all over. It is even prevalent among the tribal community of Odisha, which is quite a big thing. So you will see these tunes such as the tune Krishnanko Vesha Kari Sudama Mali Chule Khanjila Nei Ketoti Koli Je Ase Ki Kisora Huro Sona Chari Mukha Chandra Kuava Devase Gilije. This tune is still well heard. It is known by people who have nothing to do with who are not proper trained musicians, but will still sing this tune. These essential tunes, which have been greatly preserved in the Chanda tradition. The Chanda tradition is it's a kind of song preserved in the music repertoire, which is sung in these conventional tunes that have been passed in specific ragas and talas and metrical forms over tradition. So this was meant as an introductory window to the world of Odissi music for those who are not trained in music. So that would be your first gateway. And from there, you will proceed further. And texts were transmitted through palm leaf manuscripts, like the one that you see. This is a manuscript of my ancestors who used to sing Puranas in the villages. So they were Purana Pandas, and how they would sing. And even there you will find reflections of the Vedic tradition, as I was saying, the Samavedic tradition, for example. Joyo Joyo Jagannath Nadi Karono Joyo Joyo Jagannath Santho Nivaran Joyo Joyo Jagannath Daruru Podhari Joyo Joyo Jagannath Kilo Bihari. This way of singing, which is called the Bachanika Alapo, considered one of the Sadanga Alapo in the tradition of Odissi music. This Sadanga Alapo was a main concept, and it retained parts of the earlier Bachanika tradition, the freestyle singing, singing without rhythm, singing with variety of rhythms. Joyo Joyo Jagannatho Daru Rupo Dhari. This is the 3/3 meter, and then they would change it frequently. The Puranic tradition maintained the core dharana of these ragas and talas and chandas, even though they did not sing music for the performance tradition. And then later period, paper manuscripts became important, just like this manuscript. This is a almost 1850 manuscript belonging to the royal family of Tikili, which is right now not in Odisha anymore, which in Anjala. That is how texts were transmitted. With that, we'll move to the essential major composers. I will just talk about 4 major composers since it's already an hour. The first of whom is Kavi Samrat Upendra Bhanja, who is known by a variety of epithets: Sangita Samrat, Kavi Samrat, Biravara, Mangaraj, and all that. Lived in the 17th century in Ghumusara, Ganjam. This illustration is an ancient illustration from Dharakota, very close to Upendra Bhanja's home place. You can see to the right, the artist has depicted Raghunatha Prushti, the palm leaf maestro, has depicted Rama and Sita in their marriage, and Upendra Bhanja is with joined palms and he is holding a sword because he belongs to the Kshatriya family. And the artist has made us a helpful note which says Upendra Bhanja Karajodi Kohu Achanti. Upendra Bhanja with folded hands is speaking to Rama. And what is so great about Upendra Bhanja is he has done everything that can be done. So he is the versatile poet who has explored all kinds of avenues, both in terms of literature, both in terms of music and melody and rhythm and meter. Everything that can be done, he has done. And he has provided the essential meters. He has provided the essential melodies. He has used the wide range of ragas. And then, of course, Bhanja is known across villages in Odisha for his mastery and his versatility, not just within the arts that are concerned directly with the tradition of music and poetry, but also things, wide-ranging things such as the erotic arts, Kama Shastra, Jyotisha Shastra, the art of astrology, the arts of, say, Ganita. He'll make specific references to poems that are encoded in mathematics. Then he has written a Sangita Shastra himself, which is anything but obvious. He has written works on Rasa Shastra, aesthetics. So with his widespread expertise, in his songs one finds a reflection of things that are extremely, say, the song that is extremely simple in terms of literature. Moli malo syamoku devi mono toshibi moli malo Syamoko Devi Grisama hoile baso Grisama hoile baso Chandana Mule pibi baso Chandana Mule pibi Molimalo Syamoko Devi. This is very simple in terms of language, And also melodically, there are far more complex compositions that Bhanja has done. For example, he has done a composition in the raga Shuddha Bhairava, in the Tala Jati. The one Malli Mado I just sung is a household song in Odisha. It is set to the raga Natanarayana, Tala Jati. It's clearly comprehensible, both from a musical point of view. It's very clear. It doesn't confuse you or befuddle you. Then Bhanja will write a song which leaves you scratching for what does the literature mean and what is this happening in the music. Morama mone ki panchila re. Beni kumbha pare sato kumbha thoi pancha manare tosila. Eke beni mukha tara chari mukha sada chakra re ghotila. Mandara sutase manare harase pandara netra mohila. So this is all mystic. So it is encoded under several layers. This is what makes Bhanja popular among the dance repertoire, the dance gurus of yore, because this is not something obvious. You need an interpreter for this. The dance gurus would act as an interpreter for this. This song, please observe the musical composition and just the layout. Shuddha Bhairava Jati. Mone ki panchila re morama mone ki panchila re morama mone ki panchila re morama mone ki panchila re. So already he is demonstrating his expertise. Beni kumbha pare sato kumbha thoi. Beni kumbha pare sato kumbha thoi. Panchamanaku tosila morama mone ki panchila re morama. These variations, which are traditionally called binyasa, like you have what is called improvisation or expansion of a song in Indian classical music. In Odisha, it is called binyasa. Then there are various kinds of binyasa, which are further divided in tradition. This binyasa is something that has been set by Bhanja himself as passed down in our Guru Parampara. This is a original composition of Upendra Bhanja. So you see the spectrum that he is spanning. He is doing simple songs, he is doing cryptic songs, he is doing musically elemental songs, then he is doing musically elaborate songs. So Bhanja is setting a model for all composers that are to come in the future, which is exactly what has happened. And then he does all this Chitra Kabya and these elaborate diagrams within which the poetry is encoded, stuff which has only been rarely attempted in most other languages. Then I'll come to the core trinity, whose compositions are more or less the most popular parts of the repertoire in the performance of the Raganga idiom, which is that when a song is sung with complete alapa and elaborated with vinyasa or various kinds of improvisational techniques, the songs of these three composers along with Bhanja are the most popular in that kind of singing. The Gita Govinda is not taken up for dissection and sabda word by word vinyasa. The Gita Govinda is not taken up for that, because the Gita Govinda is considered, it would be butchering the lyric of the Gita Govinda in order to do that. So there is this kind of composition of these poets, and they all write in Odia. This first, we will go to the works of Banamali Dasa, who is the oldest of this popular trinity. So Banamali's songs will invariably talk about Puri things, like the Chandana Jatra and the sight of Madhura Mohana. His songs are very simple, capture the essence of Puri, and he will use the Puri idiom of singing in his songs, so which is another important discussion. The schools of Odissi music, just like in Odissi dance, we have several gurus. We have the schools of Guru Devaprasad Das, Guru Keducharan Mahapatra, and Guru Pankaj Charan Das. Similarly, in Odissi music, we have the schools essentially Puri, Katak, and Ganjam. So Banamali's compositions are rooted in the Puri idiom. And therefore, you will see typical Puri reflections, the throw of the voice, the character of the voice that is typical to the Puri school, the improvisation of the Mardala, the techniques of Kala Angsa Mano, which are so very important in the Puri school, the technique of Antargati, or singing a song in one tala and varying the padi portion in various other talas. Sorry for using a lot of technical terms. The padi is a part where the tempo doubles. It's a part of a composition that is unique to again Odissi music tradition. Now I'll demonstrate in some part. So Banamali's songs capture that Puri idiom, which was spearheaded by Guru Singhari Syama Sundarakara, Adi Guru Desaraja Maudamani, Singhari Syama Sundarakara, who was a servitor of the Puri temple. So that is another point about the Puri tradition. It is intimately associated with the temple. So many singers belong to direct Sebayata lineages of the temple, just like Singhari sir, Guru Markandeya Mahapatra, Pandita Kasinath Puja Panda, Pandita Nrsinghanath Kuntia, Pandita Lokanath Pala, Pandita Lokanath Ratha, Damodara Hota sir passed away just recently. He was one of the last great scions of the Puri school. Guru Chandramani Lenka passed away just recently. He was one of the young artists of the Puri school of singing. Now the Puri school is preserved by very few people, unfortunately. The things that I told, I will just demonstrate a song of Banamali, which is sung in exactly this tune in the Jaga Akhadas of Puri. The scene that Hota sir would describe is Jaga Akhadar Bhendia Hatare Sorae Mahaprasadara Pitha Dhari Pokhari Pohari Banamalinka Gito Gauthiyo, and he would demonstrate this song. So which is a young lad of the Jaga Akhada tradition, of the martial tradition, would practice all day, and then they would get fresh food from the temple, the pithas, and then they would hold it in an earthen pot and they would swim around singing, because that was their way of relaxation. And singing itself was a big part of the Jaga Akhada tradition. The song they would sing is Sakhi bije kadam mule go vinogada munyorupa Sakhi bije kadam mule go Ek dine Sakhi more ek dine Sakhi more Goli Jamuna Nire Goha Kusuma Phula Re Sakhi Goha Kusuma Phula Re Sakhi Chandrika Chura Tapare Vinoba Lavanya. So that is a typical Puri song. Though I am trained in the Ganjam school, I've tried my best to maintain some of their nuances. But you must listen to Singhari sir and Markanda sir to get the quintessential Puri temple flavor. Then we move on to the second of the trinity that I was mentioning, Kavisurja Baladev Ratha, the author of the Champu manuscript that we saw earlier. So he writes this special kind of song called the Champu, which is, the traditional definition is Gadya Padyamayam Kavyam Champuritya Vidhiyate. That is a work which consists of prose, which Kavisurja has made in Sanskrit, and poetry, which Kavisurja has made in the form of Odissi songs. So that is the Champu. The twist that he has given is that he has maintained 34 songs in the poetry part, each beginning with one letter of the consonants of the Odia alphabet. So ka to kya, ka, kha, ga, ga, wa, cha, cha, ja. So he's written one song for each of these letters, and the ka song will have all lines beginning with ka. The kha song will have all lines beginning with kha. So he's made that twist. And then there is the musical twist as well, in that he has encompassed almost the entirety of the range of songs that can be composed. The thing that I was saying about simple and complex, and all that he has done within the champu. It contains all the essential core ragas. It contains very old ragas. It contains new ragas which have been acquired. And these acquired ragas are being dealt with in the native method. It is like in the Pattachitra, you can see modern things are being drawn, but maintaining the Pattachitra idiom. And similarly, words that were acquired into Odia language from the Mughal Bandi tradition, like tiaro, tiyari kariba, from the word tayar. So, Vaidesika words that have been adapted according to Odia phonetics and made tiaro. So much so that we are not even able to gauge which word is native and which word is foreign, because it has been adapted with such technique, the technique being the essential part of the tradition. The ability to acquire and still maintain the authenticity of the tradition. That is something Kavi Surya revels in. And he does that in his music as well as in his literature. He will use words that are Sanskritic words alongside typical Desaja or village colloquial words, alongside Vaidesika or foreign imported words. That is his expertise, which is why the wide-ranging literary and musical value of the champu made it the highest test for an Odissi musician in the days of yore. So when a musician went anywhere, for example, a musician from Ganjam goes to the Puri Mathas, then in the Puri Mathas, the test of gauging is if you can sing the champu from ka to kya with the shloka portion, with the Sanskrit portion, because that will take care of all aspects of the Sadanga Alapa, all old and new ragas, all kinds of tadas, starting from cryptic compositions in Tripota to simple compositions in Jhula, starting from the oldest ragas like Kedaragoda and massive compositions such as the Bha Champu, which sounds like in Kedaragoda, Tripota. Bhangi bhangi bhuru nila bhujangi brahmaraji vasangi bhuru nila bhujangi brahmaraji Jiva Sangi Bhuru Nila Bhujangi Bhramara Jiva Sangi Bhangi Bhagya Ejana Akhi Bhagya Ejana Akhi Jananarati Sakhi Jano Re Sakhi Jano Re Bharamina Jaitu Manmatha Banare Bhuja Pasa Kuchandi Mogare Bhuja Pasi Kuchandi Mogare Bhide Pada Kanja Kanja Dharani Tole Bhumandana Sakhire Bhumandana Bhumandana Re Bhumandana Re Bhola Manuchi Dekho Mukha Sudha ময়ূখরে ভোলা মানুছি দেখো মুখ সুধা ময়ূখ অলক তল খণ্ডিত রোচনা রেখ তিলকে দৃষ্টি রখ সখী রে তিলকে দৃষ্টি রখ সখী রে কি দিশে চলাচল চারু চন্দ্র কচুল কি দিশে চলাচল চারু চন্দ্র কচুল So this is how the Bha Champu would be sung. So herein you can see the cuttings of the phrases, the division, what is called bhangi or bhango, where it is divided, where the words rest, where the melody rests and where it takes off again, which parts of the tala, which kala or angsa. In all these aspects, this is an excellent composition, which is why Pandit Damodar Hutta, who just passed away, whose name I was mentioning, he always used to say that the composition in Odissi music, the bass composition itself is such a grand thing. It's very difficult to execute because it itself, to improvise this is a different thing. Just to sing it as it is a big deal because it is so laden with all the gamakas and all the khandas, all the bhangas that I was telling. So you can see the gamakas that I was already mentioning. Bhuja paso kuchandi mogale. This curvilinear approach everywhere. Bhide pada konja. These things, this is what is called the kampita in the Panchadasha Gamaka. So this is where Kavi Surya excels. He makes this monument of a composition that is very elegant, grand, and there is always several layers of thought below. Like this, every line starts with Bha. I don't know if you noticed. And then there is enough room to improvise on this intellectual ground of improvisation. Kavi Surya provides ample space for that. For example, the Padi part, which is sung in double tempo, was Bhola manuchi dekho mukha sudha mayukha. Traditionally, this will be then doubled. Bhola manuchi dekho mukha sudha mayukha. Bhola manuchi dekho mukha sudha mayukha. Palaka tala akhandita rochana rekha. তিলকে দৃষ্টি রখ সখী রে তিলকে দৃষ্টি রখ সখী রে কি দিশে চলাচল চারু চন্দ্র কচুল কি দিশে চলাচল চারু চন্দ্র কচুল কি দিশে চলাচল চারু চন্দ্র কচুল. Then Hota sir would end it off, wrap it off with Charu Chandra Kochula, Charu Chandra Kochula Bham. So Kavi Surya has done all these elaborate things. This is where he lived, Athagada in Ganjam, an old fort, a princely state. This is the Jagannatha temple of Athagada. He was around. This is the place where he composed, and this is the deity within. That is Kavi Surya for you. He has written a variety of Odissi songs as well, all with this typical touch of grandeur that characterizes him. Then we come to Gopala Krishna. Bonamali, whom I talked about first, does grand compositions, simple compositions, all of that. But Bonamali is more known for his simple and heartfelt compositions that are very easy to understand from a literature point of view. Musically may not be so. Kavi Surya is known for this builder of grand edifices. Although all of them have done several things, they specialize in these things according to popular tradition. Then we have this statue of Kavi Kalahamsa Gopala Krishna Pattanaik of Paralakhemudi. So we are reaching further down south in Odisha. And this statue incidentally was made by artist Vrindavana Chandra Pattnaik, who lived for over 100 years. And he made this statue at the last end of his life because he had seen Gopala Krishna live. So it's an accurate reproduction. Gopala Krishna is a trendsetter for many purposes. For example, he keeps a mustache, which was not the custom between musicians. You will see most of the earlier musicians will not have a mustache or a beard. That was not the custom among singers and instrumentalists and vocalists. Musicians wouldn't do that. Poets. That was complete no-no. Upendra Bhanja keeps a mustache because he's a Kshatriya. Gopal Krishna, being a Karana, he maintains his mustache and his characteristic simple, humble style, although he comes from a very intellectual and family that was employed in the royal quarters of Paralakemundi as well. He was a scribe for the royal family. Gopala Krishna's compositions, at one place in his early composition, he reveals the Kavi Surya Bhanja school of trade, the ability to create grand compositions. But at one point of time, he gives it all up because he believes in the simple essence or tattvatmaka composition. And therefore, he switches to this very elemental kind of composition that is very little to do with using like grand verbose words. And it is more to do with what is the point, what is the thing that's being said is very novel. So he was a Vaishnava, and in his Diksha, he used to roam around in a state of rat almost. He used to roam around in a state of ecstasy, and he would sing out in ecstasy, immersed in his thoughts of Radha Krishna in his mind. That is where he was speaking. Therefore, the sense of grandeur and the performative aspect was utterly missing from his songs. His songs will leave you feeling with a sense of calm and serenity and that divine sight and all of that. Gopala Krishna's compositions are highly favored by especially prized by the singers of the Paralakemundi royal court, eminent among whom was Gayaka Siromani Apanna Panigrahi, one of the early 20th century experts who used to sing Gopala Krishna's compositions in the typical Pareli style that was the direct lineage of Gopala Krishna's singing tradition. So each of these poets have their own singing lineage also, because all of them not only wrote but sung, and Kavi Surya even played the veena, and they would sing and they would train further musicians because they were involved with royal courts. Gopala Krishna was not, because he abandoned the court, but the king was so kind that he would come to his performances. And this is how the saintly figure of Gopala Krishna would sing, and Kirtana troops would come and sit in his performances, would learn from him and go. That's how music transmitted itself in the earlier centuries. Kavi Surya in the court would train the court singers to sing duets, to sing chorus, to sing in particular competitions in which musicians would be sent off to compete. So Kavi Surya would train them, and there are several tales of Kavi Surya's competitions, including one where he attracts a deer by singing, and it succeeds in that. And this courtly culture and the temple culture that you can see, these two are moving parallelly. And Gopala Krishna is on the Matha Mandira part of the spectrum, not the court end of the spectrum. And that you will see, and this is the Jagannatha idol of Paralakemundi, the deities in his time. And then his manuscripts are also there. So Gopala Krishna's songs, I will just demonstrate one or two in order to show you the way it is handled. In the popular raga Khambaja, set to Rupaka, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Eni kyoni radhe eni ki are ni kyoni radhe eni ki are ni kyoni radhe eniki padiba viraraja padiba aviraraja padiba viraraja padiba viraraja Sri Mukha Luare Kyoni Radhe Eniki Are. The lyric is Eni Kyoni Radhe Eniki Are. Padiva Abira Raja Sri Mukha Luare. You can see the way it is handled is very typically reflecting the dialect of Pareli or Jaipur Parala dialect of Odia, how it is spoken. That is revealed in other compositions of Gopala Krishna as well. For example, he will write something as simple as Kadamba Bane Bangsi Bajila Re Sangata Radha Dambha Sikhari Bajila Re, which is just a sentence. But in the hands of a maestro like Gopala Krishna, the line gains sanctity. It is almost empowered by some divine insight. Kadamba Bane Bangsi Bajila Re Sangata Radha Dambha Sikhari Bajila Re Kadamba Bane Bangsi Bajila Re Sangata Radha Dambha Sikhari Bajila Re To Bina Pratikara Ano Ke Nahi Moro To Bina Pratikara Ano Ke Nahi Moro Vivekar Tana Mo Vivekar Tana Mo Bajila Kadamba Bane Bangsi. These are the original compositions of Gopala Krishna. The one I just mentioned, Eni Khyoni Radhe, and this set to the Raga Dhanasri and the Tala Jati, these are original compositions of Gopala Krishna. You can see the same effortless character both in the music and the song. But in the song, you must have noticed the motifs that are used are very different from Kavi Sujya's motifs. So, Padiva Abira Raja Sri Mukha Luare Ni Khyoni Radhe. Eni Khyoni Radhe. This is called the Tiripa Gamaka. This Tiripa Gamaka is a typical factor that is found in the singing of Parada Khimundi school. And you will find elongated renditions such as, I will move on to the other poets and then demonstrate. The middle image is not correct. The image to the left that you see is an image of Kavi Gaurahari Paricha of Parada Khimundi. To the right, Kavi Chandra Kalicharana Pattnaik. And these are the three gurus, Acharya Tarini Charana Patra, who lived around 1893 to 1979, Ganjam schooling. So these are the three gurus who did the maximum amount of effort in not just promoting, but also codifying and preserving the pedagogy and transmitting the knowledge to the future generations. So Tarini Charana Patra, Ashtavadhani Acharya, who was my guru's guru. And then Adi Guru Singhari Syamasundara Kara, he was known as Desaraja. And then to the right, Sangita Sudhakara Balakrishna Das of the Katak school, which we have not talked about much often. In the songs of Kavi Surya and Gopala Krishna, the nuances that you notice belong to the Ganjam school, such as this Tiripa and these things, the tendency to emphasize aspects of the Gamakas as in the Bina tradition, because the Bina Kara tradition, as you can see in the photo, he's holding a Bina, Tarini sir. He's holding a Bina, and the tradition was playing along and singing to oneself. And that tradition has maintained the precision of these motifs to a far greater extent, because the Beenakara is obsessed with the purity of the note. And therefore, these motifs that you notice, this is of Gopala Krishna and Kavi Surya's lineage. Singhari sir has preserved the Puri lineage. The Puri lineage is in fact Jayadeva's lineage in many ways of that term. And also of several other greats, such as Kavi Chandra Divakara Mishra of Abhinava Gita Govinda. And then we have Raya Ramananda Pattanaik, who was a great music teacher in the Puri temple. Then, of course, the wealth of lineage of the Devadasis themselves, who were known as great masters of both music and dance. So much so that contemporary Odia poets would have duels with the Devadasis in matters of music and dance and literature as well. And Sangita Sudhakara Balakrishna Das from the Katak schooling. The Kataka was the center of revivalism in early 20th century, even before that, late 19th century also. Katak had established itself as a center where there were schools of music and where there were proper teachers available, where there were examinations of Odissi music, where you could get certificates, where there was Annapurna theatre, where there were several great masters in all the disciplines. In anything you were looking for, you could find in Cuttack, where there was the facility of the Akashvani, the All India Radio, where songs would be broadcast. Therefore, a thriving center of the arts, Cuttack. Balakrishna sir led that sphere, and this was a kind of renaissance thing in Cuttack that you will notice in Balakrishna sir's style, and amalgamation of the earlier identified styles. I say earlier because in tradition also it is recognized that the Ganjam and Puri schools, they will say the Dakhini Gahana, Dakhini referring to south of the coastal region of Odisha, south of Banapur, and including the areas of Nayagada, Ganjam, and within Ganjam, the areas of Manjusa, Torla, Digapondi, Dharakota, Athagada, Gumusara, Paralakemundi, Sanakemundi, Joroda, Torola, Tikili, Budar Singhi, and further down south, right until Simanchala, because in the Simanchala temple, ritually Odissi music was sung, initiated by the Ganga kings, as documented in the inscriptions. So that temple and this Kotli tradition of Ganjam, then Puri, which was referred to as Purastama Deuliya Gahana, as in our gurus would refer to certain ragas as Purastama raga. Similarly, the gurus of Puri would refer to certain ragas like Ananda Bhairavi. The song, for example, Kiso Bhago Kunje Madana Mo Se Madana Mo Cha Pranamitoni Bame Nava Kishori Kibarupa Madhuri Heri Sarva Manjari Madhye Sri Venu Tribhangi Chande Chida. This is the padi where it doubles. Tribhangi Chande Chida. Sire Mayura Chuda. Tribhangi Chande Chida. Sire Mayura Chuda. Sohe Sebati Vedha. Satin Kodambha Choda. Tribhangi Re Chahani Niye Hrudaya Kini Kede. Sundara Radhana Tu Anira Moniki Sobhago Kunje Madanamo. This song, the Puri singers, till today, a few of the older Puri singers will refer to this as Ganjami or Dakhini Raga. Dakhini, for matter of fact, refers to Dakhina Odisha, doesn't refer to south of Odisha, refers to the southern part of Odisha. But they would refer to it as a Dakhini Sangita or Dakhini Swara or Dakhini Raga, because this composition is by the king of Digapandi in Ganjam, set to the Raga Ananda Bhairavi, which is more popular in Ganjam. Similarly, in our Ganjam schooling, they would refer to the Raga Kumbha Kamodi as Purastama Raga, and they would teach in that Raga compositions by Banamali to justify the Raga. This Kumbha Kamudi, which I just demonstrated an alap of, was known as a raga of Purastama. The songs that were taught were various, including the famous Banamali composition Janana. Janana is a kind of song where you speak directly to the deity. In this, Banamali is saying, O Jagannatha, Mahaprabhu, yehi kathare mo mano. I am only interested in you, nothing else. An example for Janana will serve with Mahabahu एही कोथारे मो मन नीति देखुथिबी नीलाद्रि मंडपे नीति देखुथिबी नीलाद्रि मंडपे कंज सुंदर बदन बाहु एही कोथारे मो मन This was sung in quite a lengthened manner by the Maharis again. And with that, I'll lay to rest the repertoire. I have more or less introduced the main poet composers. Now for some of the 20th century history, as I was already talking about All India Radio. Before that was the gramophone and cylindrical records. Like this one that has been retrieved by Sri Vedabandhu Misra and digitized and put online on a channel called Odia Melody, which is a treasure trove of these early gramophone recordings. So gramophone recordings right from the 1906 until 1940 were predominantly Odissi song only, because the folk songs did not receive necessary attention for recording, although few have been recorded. Because the traditional classification was only this Odissi song and then this folk songs or Loka Sangita. Then there was a new emerging kind of Adhunika Sangita which was later introduced. Then came film music and then further modern genres. And this is the first record. Asu Chanti Brajavasi, interestingly sung by Sheikh Khan Muhammad from Cuttack, who was popularly known as Khanomia. And he sang this composition on Krishna. Asuchanti brajavasi go Asuchanti brajavasi dhire dhire chali chali go. This song, recorded by George Walter Dillnut, if I can recall correctly. I might be mistaken. No, this was not recorded by Dillnut. This was recorded by somebody else. It was recorded by a European officer who had come to Odisha searching for artists, and he was introduced to Pandit Gokula Srichandan of the Kendrapada royal family, who was another of the great leaders who took upon himself to not only teach but also organize lecture demonstrations in places as far away as in Kashmir and in Jammu, in Lucknow, in the Darbar of the Nizam of Hyderabad. He used to sing Odissi songs. So he was one of the earliest people who led this scholastic movement. Then other people as well, like Pandita Syamasundara Dheer, who retrieved manuscripts of the Gita Prakasha and all. Then Manikantha Nimai Charana Harichandana, who was one of the first commercially successful artists who recorded Odissi music, which led to a widespread open environment so that more artists could earn a viable livelihood from music by singing in gramophones and the All India Radio and all that kind of things. And this was my last slide. I will just talk some little bit about the present. The Utkala Sangita Mahavidyalaya was established in the recent past, sometime after the 60s, if I'm correct. So, which is quite late considering the need of a institutionalized system of music education where children can come and learn according to syllabus and get a certificate, and using that certificate get jobs. And that is something that Utkala Sangita Mahavidyalaya remains the sole institute dedicated to that training in Odisha even until today, which is quite insufficient for students from across the state. Therefore, that is where these are the places where there exists certain scope of improvement. Similarly, All India Radio is under the Central Information and Broadcasting Ministry, which does not explicitly grant longer slots to any music other than Hindustani music and Carnatic music. So therefore, they have that thing. If you appear in auditions of All India Radio, you will have a list, and there will be classical ragas, and then there will be a list of ragas from Hindustani and Carnatic, even if you are an instrumentalist. And they just assume that there is nothing else because All India Radio is an institution that was established by the British. So that legacy is continuing, and it has never been updated. And therein comes the term classical music, because in All India Radio, they used to broadcast programs of classical music and training and all that. And in that, only the northern and the southern traditions got the necessary exposure. I do not think the Northeast Indian tradition has also gotten any exposure. For that matter, there is the Nepali tradition, which is also very much a part of the Indian stream, like the Panchada mentioned in the Shastras. And then there is also Udra Magadhi, which is Odissi is in a very great shape, despite the lack of attention from the center and the discriminatory things and the lack of, say, proper infrastructure to support artists. The lack of infrastructure to support and ensure that artists should go down this path and they have enough performance avenues and they have enough employability avenues has not been taken up by the central government. And that is where the lacuna exists. The Odisha state government has recognized Odissi music as classical. It has been almost 10 years since that recognition. And the gurus of yore, of course, are used to highlight the sophisticated technique, and they would have mentioned directly the Shastra. So the reliability of the word Shastriya is very much undisputed. Several scholars and musicians of the other traditions, after having seen and heard Odissi music over the last several decades, after this effort to just make it known outside the state, even with the gramophone movement and all after that, have recognized that there is this independent school of music existing and have recognized that this is unique and that this is classical. That has been undisputedly recognized by several well-known Pandits of both South India and North India. Not that it is a requisite, but pan-Indian exposure is not something new, because right from 1906, Gokul Chandra C. Chandan used to go to Kendrapada. So that's not a ground. As of now, the situation is several things need to be done to encourage the artist to come into this. That's all. In terms of education, in terms of jobs, and in terms of performance, so that they can earn a livelihood out of this, and so that they get pan-Indian platforms to do that. That is the present state of events. And of course, more institutions for education, online education and all, we are catching up. We are quite digital. Those grounds we are quite well off. I would say we are the only non-Hindustani, non-Carnatic tradition, musical tradition that has been able to preserve itself to such a great extent and with this great deal of conservativeness, that conservativeness in a good manner, in an authentic manner. And it is priceless because certain artifacts of Bharata's Natya Shastra have been preserved in the North Indian stream, some in the South Indian stream, and some in the Eastern stream. The loss of it would only have made India as a whole poorer. So while we have retained this tradition, because the people of Odisha had the dedication and had the vision in the 1900s to institute and to do the syllabus and all that. And in several other regions of India, that has not been happening. Unfortunately, in the Nepali tradition, I feel very sad about. The Nepali tradition had its own unique ragas and taras and way of singing. And that is a tradition that I see highly influenced by Hindustani music right now, which is something that should not have happened because their native tradition was tied with the Buddhist tradition. It's very unique. And that is something we've been able to protect ourselves from. We're quite well in that regard. Just like the Odia language is one of the languages that preserves a great deal of Sanskrit words and colloquial words and is least influenced by foreign elements. Similarly, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, Odissi music also retains certain very antique elements, which are helpful in the reconstruction of ancient Indian music as a whole. So with that in mind, I hope the government looks into regional traditions with more love and affection and encourages research and performance in these traditions. With that, I learned.
Thank you, Prateek. It has been a very engaging, enlightening, and very interesting last 1.5 hours. Thanks to your talk. I will now request all the participants to raise your hand if you want to ask any questions to Prateek. Meanwhile, I'll just start with I have several questions, as you know, but I'll start with one small question. See, Prateek, you have covered almost from the era of Harvard to 18th century in terms of names and the people who have contributed something new to Odissi music or Odissi writing, right? So, what is next? In the sense, now, correct me if I'm wrong, we are trying to safeguard or make sure that tradition survive. But are there concentrated effort on how to take it one step higher? I mean, are
There are. The state government is quite concerned with that. They organize multiple festivals dedicated to Odissi music across the year, but that is not enough. There need to be more private efforts. In fact, the private efforts were the dominant efforts in the early part of the 20th century, but they faded down with these changing times and all that. Most institutions could not survive. That is a big lacuna. The earlier music institutions of Odisha, very few have survived. For example, the school of Acharya Tarinacharana Patra, which is 1941, one of the earliest institutions in that part of Odisha and overall in Odisha also. That is now totally gone. After his death, and it continued until 1990, it's an abandoned. Now, what will happen of that institute? Why should a child from Paralakhyamundi, which is itself a big center of the musical arts, why should they have to come all the way to Bhubaneswar to learn? That doesn't make sense. And similarly, learning Odissi music outside Odisha. It's the same thing that has happened for Odissi dance. You have courses in Odissi dance you can take in Delhi, Kolkata, Mumbai, anywhere. That you can't do in Odissi music. You will have to do a online session with a guru. Why is that? Why doesn't a central government, why is there not a UGC approved course on Odissi music that I could have taken as an extra subject when I was in 10th? I could have taken. I was not able to take because there was this music was this bland topic, and under music, if you ask further again, you will find that binary classification that has ruined India in all aspects. And this binary does not exist just in music. It's almost a kind of cultural hegemony that extends in all spheres of culture scholarship, and this is an artifact of Indology. In fact, it's an artifact of colonial scholarship. It's not a native point of view because Bharata Muni is nowhere stating a binary. That is what we need to break out of. There needs to be a east-west axis. Why is the axis north-south? There is no point of it. And similarly, in West India also, I'll point out, West India, the Haveli Sangeet tradition is now considered a subset of the Hindustani music tradition by many. But it is not so. It is more antique than the general Khayal Thumri repertoire of Hindustani music. It is more with the Drupad repertoire. It's an older repertoire. And that repertoire which was sung in the temple of Dwarikadisha or Srinathji, that repertoire needs also, it has survived, it is in good shape, but it is somehow in the shadows of the Hindustani tradition. Because the earlier singers you have Haveli Sangeet recorded, it's a very different voice texture, voice throw that is hardly found now. So the government needs to make concerted efforts in order to first UGC approved course, make a proper syllabus, introduce education of Odissi music and degrees of Odissi music outside Odisha as well as within Odisha. The state government will take care. And then there is the educational policy, just like in South India, if you go to any school to be a music teacher, you need to be a Carnatic music teacher, will be given priority. Because not just the school administration wants the teacher to know Carnatic, even the students want to learn Carnatic music. Because why should they learn something that is not theirs? The immediate attraction will be towards the local tradition, which is an obvious thing, which is something that was stated by Hota sir in personal communication with me again. Hota sir was, for some reason, I'm recalling him a lot today. That Hota sir used to say that when the Odissi department was thrown open, and then the admission to the Hindustani music department of the Utkal Sangeet Mahavidyalaya receded so much that he has made a public comment where he says that all the good kids go to the Odissi department. Which is an obvious thing. If you provide the native education, obviously the Odia people will prefer to learn the Odia tradition. There are further gaps in the study of instrumental traditions, like the Bina that I'm only learning privately. There has never been a course in Bina since the private school of Acharya Tarinacharana Patra closed down in the 1990s. After that, there is nobody giving a certificate in Odissi Bina. He used to give a 6-year certificate in Odissi Bina. So now the Bina tradition doesn't have a department. You cannot learn it in a school. Where does one learn it? Not everybody will go inside and look where is this one person who is learning. So there needs to be a department. The department can have one student, which is fine. There are several departments that have one student now in India. There are several specialized niche departments that have one. The Mardala is fortunately the only one that could have been institutionalized by the efforts of Pandit Vanamali Maharana. He made a course and the Mardala is proper, and the Mardala also has a lot of patronage in the Odissi dance scenario because it is inevitable for the Mardala artist there. flute, till now we don't have a Odissi music flute course. Till now we don't have a Odissi music violin course. Why is that? Pandit Bhubaneswar Mishra was a great exponent. He has taught people privately. Same person could have taught in an institutional setup and certificates could have been given. Right now the thing is, if you want to be a violinist, you need a degree in violin to survive, to get a job. You will get a degree in Hindustani or Carnatic violin because there is no course in Odissi violin. You will go and learn Hindustani violin and you will have to learn Bhupali, Desh, Deshkar, which you have nothing to do with because you will play, ultimately your livelihood is from playing in Odissi dance and Odissi music recitals as accompaniment or even as solo recitals. And there you will again have to play Odissi music. So you will have to relearn this. That is double the load. This double the load is, nobody wants this. Just make it clear so that whoever wants what can go in that specific direction, because that is where mastery comes from. That's all.
Correct. And thank you. As there is no hand raised. Okay, there are 2 hand raised. Oh my God. Okay. Dr. Shraddha Saifonia, is Shraddha, please unmute yourself, and if it's comfortable, please show yourself also. I mean, if it's okay, kindly start your video and unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yes, Prateek. Actually, the talk was immensely informative. Namaskar. It was our pleasure, in fact, to hear from you after such a long time. And it was loaded with information, passion, creativity, and whatnot. But I would like to ask you one question, as you have taken many interviews with veteran Odissi gurus. Like, was it that Pattachitra, in the very primitive era, was it that the Pattachitra was initially based upon the very primitive ragas, or ragas got their lineage from the Pattachitra, or like what way it was?
The Chitra tradition has translated the sound into a visual depiction. That is clear.
Okay.
Dhyana parampara na. So if I have to sing, say, any raga for that matter, then Ama Guru Parampara, we prelude it with a Dhyana Sloka, which is something that Hota sir corroborated. In the Puri tradition also it was there. In Devasa's dance compositions, you can see the Pallavi is preceded by a Dhyana Sloka. It is also there in several miscellaneous traditions like Radha Pramalila, Prahlad Nataka, etc. Also there also it is preserved.
Yeah.
For example, Kedara Goda, if I have to sing, I will have to begin with a Dhyana Sloka. Suddha Bhairava se. Sachandrahasang phalakang dadhano nibaddha kesah drudhabaddha chuda. Sachandrahasa khadga saita sachandrahasang phalakang khadga evang shield dhari nibaddha kesah drudhabaddha chuda. Gatir bitanvan bahudha padatihi. Then there is something bahudha padati bhairava ayam. There is something bhairavoyam that is there in the sloka. So therefore, Bhairava is a warrior marching into war. That is the Chitrakara visualization, anthropomorphic. Jehetu, because ragas came from the Vedic tradition. Therefore, ragas are deities. You have to meditate just like Ganesh Shankara Dhyana Achi, Raga Dhyana Achi. And this is also not found outside Odisha. This is something very unique to Odisha. And they had proper patti ghare rakhuthile. And like गंजा पे रखा जाए पट्टी रखुथिले घरे राग पट्टी रखुथिले पट्टी को देखुथिले नमस्कार करथुले पूजा करथुले that tradition was also there.
हां सेटा रघुपुर किछटा वेटरन गुरु माने पट्टचित्र गुरु से माने मते कहितले कि जेते पट्टचित्र बोली किछि एंटिटी एग्जिस्ट करू नथिला सेतेबे जो यात्री पट्टी एवं गंजपा these were the medium what they did basically when something called पट्टचित्र didn't exist तो सेही समय रे तो रागर प्रचलन डेफिनेटली थिला so
Raga Prachalana is much older. And we have some reference for that because Bharatanka time ru Matanga, Brihadesi, Kohala, ityadi. We know that 7th century earlier also there was some kind of a pre-raga, proto-raga structure gote kon thila.
Acha.
It's fairly older.
ठीक है बहुत धन्यवाद
हमें गाइबा आगु typically we will say Sachandrahasam phalakang dadhano निबद्ध कक्षो दृढ़बद्ध चूड़ गतिर्वितन्वन् बहुधा पदाति something bhairava. That is the, so this is invoking the raga devata avirbhava. This comes from the tantric lineage of the, as in everything else, this comes from the agamic tradition. We have certain secret practices also. Ama Guru Parampara achi. Singhari Sankara, I don't know. He had some things because he used to, Singhari sir used to give manture ki dautile saga. मंतुरे की साग दोथिले गाइबा पई त तंत्र प्रभाव थिला एवं से बायता परिवार रे तांका पाखरे से विद्या थिला एवं कोन जार खना दोष थिला कोन खाइबा को देकी मंतुरे की छडे दोथिले तांकर से उडा थिला इंटरव्यू रे कहचंती तांका पचरा हला आपनकर कोठी आपन गांती ना महाप्रभु को कान रे गाइ देले मोर तृप्ति लागे कहचंती that tradition is there because ritual space re gita bola hele that codification tantra niyam pale asibo ଆମ ଗୁରୁ ପରମ୍ପରାରେ ବୀଜ ମନ୍ତ୍ର ଥିଲା ସପ୍ତ ସ୍ୱର ପାଇଁ ଏବେ ବି ଅଛି
ସପ୍ତ ସ୍ୱର ପାଇଁ ବୀଜ ମନ୍ତ୍ର
ଅଛି ପୁରା ଛନ୍ଦ ସହିତ କୋହଳୀୟ ବୋଲି ଗୋଟେ ଶାସ୍ତ୍ର ଅଛି କୋହଳ ମୁନିଙ୍କର କୋହଳ ଜଣେ ପୁରାତନ ଆଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଭରତଙ୍କ ସମୟର କୋହଳାଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟଙ୍କୁ ଓଡିଶାରେ ହିଁ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱ ଦିଆଯାଏ କୋହଳାଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟଙ୍କର ସବୁ ମେନସନ ଗୁଡାକ ଓଡିଶାରେ ହିଁ ବାହାରୁଛି ସେ କୋହଳଙ୍କର ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ ରେ ସେ ଜିନିଷଟା ଅଛି ଆଗମ ପରମ୍ପରାର ବୀଜ ମନ୍ତ୍ରକୁ ଧରିକି ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ଗୋଟେ ସ୍ୱରକୁ ବୀଜ ମନ୍ତ୍ର ଧରି ବୀଜ ମନ୍ତ୍ର ହେଲେ ବହୁତ କ୍ରିଟିକାଲ ଏଣ୍ଡ ଡେଞ୍ଜରସ୍ that thing is there ଆମର ଏମିତି ବି କବି ଅଛନ୍ତି ପାରଳାଖେମୁଣ୍ଡିର କବିଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ରଘୁନାଥ ପରୀକ୍ଷା ନୀଳ ସରସ୍ୱତୀ ତନ୍ତ୍ର ସାଧନା କରିକି ରଚନା କରୁଥିଲେ ତାଙ୍କର କଣ୍ଡିସନ ଥିଲା ଯେ ସେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ମାନେ ଜୀବଦଶାରେ ଯାହା ଯଶ ଖ୍ୟାତି ପାଇବେ ମରଣ କାଳ ଉପଗତ ହେଲେ ପୁଣି ଠାକୁରାଣୀଙ୍କୁ ଫେରେଇ ଦେବେ ଯାହା ଠାକୁରାଣୀ ଦେଇଥିବେ ଯୋଉଟା ପ୍ରଚାର ହେଇନି ଫେରେଇ ଦେବେ ସେ ଗୁଡାଏ ପୋଥି ନେଇକି ତାଙ୍କର ମରଣ କାଳରେ ବଂଶଧାରା ନଦୀରେ ଭସେଇ ଦେଲେ ସରସ୍ୱତୀଙ୍କୁ ଫେରେଇ ଦେଲେ ଯୋଉଟା ମାନେ ଅପ୍ରଚଳିତ ମାନେ ଯାହା କପି ଅଛି ସେଟା ବଞ୍ଚିଛି ତାଙ୍କ ଓରିଜିନାଲ ମାନୁସ୍କ୍ରିପ୍ଟ କିଛି ନାହିଁ ଏଇ ଜିନିଷ ଏଇ ସିଦ୍ଧ ପରମ୍ପରା ଏଇଟା କରିଦେଲେ ଆମର ତାରିଣୀ ସାର୍ ଯାହାଙ୍କ ନାଁ କହୁଥିଲେ ସାରଙ୍କ ସାର୍ ଅଷ୍ଟାବଧାନୀ ଆଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଅବଧାନ ଗୋଟେ ପରୀକ୍ଷା ହଉଥିଲା ବସିକିରି ଅବଧାନ ଏକ୍ସାମିନେସନ ଗୋଟେ ହଉଥିଲା ଯୋଉଥିରେ କି ଘୋରା ହଉଥିଲା ଲୋକଙ୍କୁ ରାଜଦରବାରରେ ଖଲିକୋଟ ରାଜଦରବାରରେ 100ଟା so there is this ancient test called avadhana in Odisha in which you can do an avadhana in anything. Avadhana is a test of excellence in the royal court where more than 100 pandits are invited into the court from various other courts and then you are grilled in a sort of competitive thing for months together, day in and day night, 18 hours each day. So Tarini Charana Patra was an Ashtabadhani. So he sat in the Khalikot Raj Darbar. The king organized an avadhana for him and called all the pandits. You need to have 8 disciplines. Ashtabadhana means expertise in 8 disciplines. Avadhana, of course, chitta avadhana means focus your mind, pay attention. The extreme attention is called avadhana. In that tradition, Sangita avadhana thila. Se Sangita avadhana re qualify karchanti. That Sangita avadhana had a variety of tests. And we have those tests, for example, like mane rhythm test, test. This is all that, in that there are a lot of these mystic tests. से पछपटे जने बाड़ेबो गोड़ी फिंगिबो गोड़ी गणिया पड़िबो इत्यादि इत्यादि बहुत विचित्र टाइप रो दीप जळे की सप्तांग रे दीप रखिबो दीप चहलु नथिबो शिखा सप्तांग रे ताळ पकेबो ए सब जिंस अछि इत्यादि इत्यादि तो द पॉइंट इज सी मध्ये कोठी गीत गाइथिले 1940 रे तारिणी सर गीत गाइथिले से बोइराणी रे अष्टप्रहरी सांग कला बेले गोटे गीत गाइले पुरी रे आंकर चळु रे पूजा पंडा चळु रे जगन्नाथ दिसिले पूजा पंडा अध्याय पढिले तांको स्वप्नादेश हैला जे मु अछि बोइराणी रे भक्त माने कीर्तन करछन मु जाउछि बोइराणी रे गले आंको पचारले कहलारु से कहिले जे बोइराणी रे कोन हेछि ना पुरी रे अबडा माने भोग हेइ परनी जे तू चळु रे दिसु नांती से तत्क्षणी गाइथिले आउ की देखिब नयन आउ की देखिब नयन मो बाई मन आउ की देखिब नयन बोइराणी ग्राम बैकुंठ धाम हरि नामे परिपूर्ण मो बाई मन. We have written something like this. So this mysticism remains in our tradition, and it has vanished away from the post 1970 generation.
Prateek, just to add a question re, jadi there are means tradition of kind of karna mantra tame jaha kahila mu tara kon special ceremony हुए ना, I mean how it is done. I mean I presume je asle tak to diya hunuthu, so that's why
I
I'm
have
asking.
no clue bhai. I know one thing je ଜଗନ୍ନାଥଙ୍କର ମହାର୍ଦ ବ୍ୟବହାର ହଉଥିଲା କାହିଁକି ମହାର୍ଦ early vinas what we get ରକ୍ତ ଚନ୍ଦନ ବିଣା ଏରିକା from ପାରଳା ଖେମୁଣ୍ଡି in the royal courts, and they were consecrated with ଜଗନ୍ନାଥଙ୍କର ମହାର୍ଦରେ. It had something ତ ମହାର୍ଦର ସ୍ଥାନ ଥିଲା ଯୋଉଟା କି ପୁରୀରେ ବି ଥିଲା କିନ୍ତୁ across ଓଡ଼ିଶା ମଧ୍ୟ ଥିଲା. ମହାର୍ଦରେ କଣ ଅନୁକୂଳ ଗୋଟେ କଣ ଗୋଟେ କରୁଥିଲେ. In Hindustan you have that gandaband ceremony. We don't have something of tying the thread, but we have an anukula ceremony, and we have the Goa tradition seta ta achi, and we have the secretive sadhana tradition also. Gopinath sir je Padmasri paile 106 janko heichi se jaiki गुम्फा रे साधना करचंती 20 दिन कहंती नाही आमे केते पचारछु विरक्त होंती तांको पचारले कोन रागी जानती कोन पचारि साधना जे से करिचंती से 106 वर्ष से पीढ़ी रे सेतबेले भी तांकर प्रचलन थिला जे गोटे दीक्षा नै कि साधना करिवो एपटे गीत
ନାଇଁ କଂସନ ଏତିକି ଖାଲି ସେଇଠି ମରି ନ ଯାଅ
सेटा गला
ଗୁପ୍ତ ରହୁ କିନ୍ତୁ ସେଇ
almost dead.
प्रतीक मोर भी केतिरी कथा कहबार थिला. प्रथमतः बहुत बहुत माने बहुत धन्यवाद. धन्यवाद तो इनफ नुहे शब्द रे. द्वितीय तीनिटा जिनस मोर कहबार अछि. प्रथमे मु श्रद्धांकर जो क्वेश्चन थिला तारि उपरे टिके एक्सटेंड करी कहूची. आमे जेते बेले टैंजिबल माने प्रूफ कथा देखुचे ना, प्रतीक भी सेता मेंशन करथिले. चित्रटा सब बेले पामलीफ माने तालपत्र रे हिची कि पट्टरे जो तयारी हिची तार गोटे लॉन्जिविटी ही थिबो. तेणु आमे जदि हमर स्कल्पचरल एविडेंस देखुचे जो टैंजिबल प्रूफ हाउस सेटा एबे पर्यंत 2000 वर्ष तलर स्कल्पचर आमे देखुचे ताहले निश्चय चित्रर भी प्रचलन से समय रे थिबो किंतु बोध हुए आम पाखरे सेटा आ नाही आ सेही प्रचलनटा कंटिन्यू करथिबो से लाइनेजटा. तेणु जदि आमे भाबुचे जे पट्टचित्र कि ट्रेडिशनल चित्रटा ओनली 12th सेंचुरी कि 13th सेंचुरी रे छि मे बी नुहे माने जस्ट गोटे
पट्टचित्र जो स्टेज ऑफ इवोल्यूशन रे अछि 12th सेंचुरी रे 12th सेंचुरी रे द स्टेज ऑफ इवोल्यूशन इन व्हिच स्कल्पचर इज इट इज इम्पॉसिबल जे पट्टचित्र
बस माने सेटाला जस्ट गोटे एक्सटेंडेड थॉट थिला कहयार थिला.
स्वाभाविक
एंड
कथा
आज्ञा तापरे
द्वितीय मच ओल्डर ट्रेडिशन तारो रूट जे कि बाहरिबो जो ट्राइबल आर्ट रॉक आर्ट सेति जे आमे जे संगीत रे भी मु जदि वैदिक परंपरा हेले 4000 वर्ष पूर्व गली मु सेटु पुनी जाई परिबी लोक संगीत सेटु कंध संगीत आदिवासी संगीत गले भी लिंक पारिबो.
बस मोर द्वितीय क्वेश्चन टा सेया थिला. मो द्वितीय क्वेश्चन हला आमे जेतला आजिका डेट रे ओडिसी कहूचे आ ओडिसी रो पारंपरिक गायन शैली को कहूचे सेथिरे खोळ खंजणी धुनी पाखरे गाइबा कि विभिन्न छोट छोट लोक प्रचलन जहाँ रही जाइची सेटार भी दैट इज आल्सो अ वेरी वेरी सिग्निफिकेंट पार्ट ऑफ आवर एंटायर ओडिसा रो म्यूजिक परंपरा रो रिपर्टोयर. तेणु जेतले आमे कंजर्वेशन क्यूरेशन आ प्रोपागेशन कथा कहूचे इट शुड बी लाइक अ होलसम थिंग एंड आमे से ए सब जिंस को कलेक्टिवली बोध हुए देखिवार अछि. तो प्रतीक तुमे आज तो मोस्टली ओडिसी रो ट्रेडिशनल गायन उपरे कल टिके खोळ खंजणी ए जो सब ध्वनि संगीत कि जोड़ा एकदम ट्रेडिशनल ता उपरे जदि दिधाड़ी कहबो भल लागंता. आ तृतीय रे मोर गुटे थिला जे जो जिनसरी कहूथिल ओडिसी संगीत ओडिसी नृत्य तार केमती हमर धाराबद्ध गोटे सिलेबस हंता एंड ऑल दैट मु भाबुची ओडिसी एज अ होल माने ओडिसी रो हमर विजुअल आर्ट्स परफॉर्मिंग आर्ट्स क्रिएटिव आर्ट्स सबुर ओडिसा रो ट्रेडिशनल जो परंपरा हमर रहिची ताको नै कि गोटे विधिवत गोटे किछि वी हैव टू कलेक्ट. हाँ माने सेठी सब किछि हे परिबो कारण आगुरु जने जदी पेंटिंग भी करूथिले पट्टचित्र भी माने वॉल म्यूरल भी बनौथिले ତାଙ୍କୁ ସେ ଲିଟରେଚର ବି ସେତିକି ଅଗାଧ ପାଣ୍ଡିତ୍ୟ
ନିଶ୍ଚିତ
ଥିଲା, ସେ
ନିଶ୍ଚିତ
ବୁଝୁଥିଲେ। ତେଣୁ ଗୋଟେ ଇଣ୍ଟରଡିସିପ୍ଲିନାରୀ କୋର୍ସ ଷ୍ଟ୍ରକ୍ଚର ତିଆରି କରିବାର ଅଛି, ଯୋଉଟା କି ଆମର ଏଣ୍ଟାୟାର ଓଡ଼ିଶୀର ଟ୍ରେଡିସନଟାକୁ ଆଗକୁ କଣ୍ଟିନ୍ୟୁ କରିପାରିବ।
ନିଶ୍ଚିତ।
ବାସ୍ ଏଇ ତିନୋଟି କଥା ମୋର ଥିଲା। ପ୍ରତୀକ କୁହ।
ହଁ, ଆପଣ ଯୋଉ କହିଲେ ଶେଷରେ, ମୁଁ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଗାଉଛି ଧରନ୍ତୁ, ଦେଖିବ ପରାଶରେ ପ୍ରାଣ ସଙ୍ଗିନୀ ପ୍ରାଣ ସଜନୀ ଶ୍ରୀବଂଶୀଧର ବେଶକୁ নট নাগর ঝুলিবা চালি তার নট নাগর ঝুলিবা চালি তার সেবাঙ্ক নয়নর চাহানি ছোট কপু। এই যে কৃষ্ণଙ୍କ ରୂପ ବର୍ଣ୍ଣନା, এইটা শুনিলে মতে পটচিତ୍ର মনে পড়িବା କଥା। ଆଉ ସେଟା ଆମ ପୂର୍ବାଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ମାନେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସେ ତ ଗୀତ ଲେଖିକି ଚିତ୍ର ଆଙ୍କି ଦେଇଛନ୍ତି ତା ପାଖରେ। It is very obvious that the art is a visual translation of the song and that both traditions are deriving from each other. So if the chitrakara is not exposed to the song today, it is a problem of the modern educational method. In the earlier system, you would be immersed in it. You would be forced to encounter the Patachitra Krishna image because there was simply no other image. But nowadays, people will imagine Nitish Bharadwaj. Not that it is negative. It does not fit in with the aesthetic of this form. That is the point of it. As other what friends from Puri earlier, I've interviewed quite a few elderly people in Puri and in Old Town and this Puri culture part of the belt. And what they say is ଭାତ ଡାଲି ଅରୁଆ ଡାଲମା ନ ଖାଇଲେ ଓଡ଼ିଶୀ ଗୀତ ଗାଇ ପାରିବନି, which I agree. You need to have the traditional cuisine also, that perhaps some scientific study will find it has some impact on the voice culture. Puri voice culture is very distinctive because of the bhango.
Even Pratik, in the other part, माने पट्टचित्र रे ସେମାନେ କହନ୍ତି ଡେଲି ଭାଗବତ ନ ପଢିଲେ ପଟ୍ଟଚିତ୍ର କରି ପାରିବନି।
Correct. ଭାଗବତ ସାର ମର୍ମ ପଞ୍ଚସଖାଙ୍କର at the base is the philosophy, and that is the philosophy itself is leading to the curvilinear thing that is deciding the nature of the art form is a translation of the philosophical base.
Absolutely, and this is what is the essence of our Odisha soul, you can say. Like Odisha is, I personally feel this is what differentiates our art heritage, cultural heritage, and even any heritage of Odisha than any other part of India. I mean, every part has its own cultural heritage, but Odisha ro e jo gote spiritualness thila sabbu bele, even at the most common level to the most so-called educated level, sabu kalare ମାନେ ଯୋଉଟା ମୁଁ ସେତେବେଳେ କହୁଥିଲି, ଖୋଳଟେ ବସି ଖୋଳ ଧରିକି ଖଞ୍ଜଣି ଧରି ଗାଇଲେ ବି ସେଥିରେ ବି ଯୋଉ ସ୍ପିରିଚୁଆଲନେସ୍ ଥିଲା, and at the same time classical literature text re jo spiritualness thila, both are like two extreme ends, but like paripuraka mane parasparara paripuraka thila. So yeah,
that is the aesthetics discussion. This is a very long discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And 70 parjanta jo thila, what you said, I totally agree on that. Till the 70s, Odisha's the psyche of Odias and everything,
This
after
is everywhere, not just
90s, it
Odisha.
has taken, since we are a niche focus today on Odisha, somehow after the 80s, 90s, there has been a very like a exponential shift in that particular aesthetic
If you
sense.
look at it that way, the immersion in the traditional arts, in all forms of the traditional art, dance costume, dance will tie into textile, then further music, percussion, literature, art, food, all that. Anything that you take, this immersion does not exist in the post 1980 civilization, is what I would say. Does not exist to that level, and this is the case in all parts of India, and in Odisha it is quite late. The inflection point is very late in Odisha, 1980. In other parts of India, much earlier, this has been eroded because English education, Victorian policing, all that has happened. Maybe we can sing even now the sculptors of Odisha will make a Maithuna image because that is the tantric lineage, and the gaze is not negative. The gaze is a very sattvic gaze. Now, how do you, that is still surviving in Odisha. That is what I mean when I say conservative. That is harkening back to an older part of Indian philosophy. And that is a general tendency in everything, because it is there in that philosophical base, it is manifesting itself in the arts as well, which it will. And Panchasakha have to be congratulated for that, because if they had not done that, perhaps it would not have survived this far.
So it all means that there is an ecosystem. Calling it an ecosystem would be slightly demeaning it, because the ecosystem term is used exclusively for technology devices. But then composing Odissi music, singing it, then the Odissi dance, and then the Pattachitra. And there would be many more things, the folk arts, they all become an ecosystem which is ultimately focused or targeted at the reigning deity of Odisha, that is Lord Jagannatha. So unless one is devoted to Lord Jagannatha and then contributes to these unique abilities, like one is able to sing, or one is able to dance, one is able to compose some music. Finally, everything boils down to the fact that one has to be expert in one of these branches of art, and then he can excel in other things. Like if one needs to draw Pattachitra, he also has to sing or at least listen to Odissi music or recite in its mind, like that.
Much of this discussion derives from my night-long conversations with Vibhu. So there is due credit for that. Although I have talked with other people, there is a lot of essential deep level similarity in the pedagogical aspects of Pattachitra and Odissi music, if you follow the ancient pedagogy, that is. And that way, these are two manifestations of the same philosophy. There is a visual and the sonic. So it is more like the agamic and nigamic traditions balancing each other out by one is based on form and one is sound. It is much akin to that. And therefore, we are hearkening back to Veda Parampara, because that is the core of that. To go before that also we will find in Odisha. For example, Amara Chandare jo gant. Chapo dhari Raghunath gole mrugo mari Chandalo Ravana mote Neu achi dhari ke kahibe go Swami ke ne barota paibe go. This tune, if you trace back, you will find it even in Guduki, Khanjani, Ghoda Nacha. Khanjani is still more sophisticated. If we go further, I am not using the term sophistication in a demeaning manner, because each form has its own grammar, and for us to call something sophisticated or classical and something is folk, that all has been dismantled in today's thought. But anyhow, there is an extent of codification. I am referring with respect to that. That codification thing, you will find this tune exists as a natural practice even in the tribal communities of Odisha. It is just like the Andolita is such a fundamental thing in Odissi music. To do this is as fundamental as Odia Sabdara Sesare jo Okara achi. This is Sri Ramo. The thing of maintaining the ending or, that is such an essential thing. Some grammarian has come and written that Odia Sesa Ucharita hue. But it is not after it is written that practice is far more ancient than when it was written. That is what I am referring to. Because at this level, things need to be looked at. For example, I was looking at, because we come from that Purana Panda lineage in my maternal grandmother's side, they were based in Nabarangpur. They would sing, of course, shloka. Shukram Bharadharam Vishnum Sasivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vigno Pasantaye. Etre raga ଅଛି ନା ନାହିଁ? Sagama pa ga pa ma ma ga ma pa ma ga ma ga sagama pa ni ma pa ga ma pa ma. A same jinsataku, this is what leads to the raga. The mantra chanting, then Veda chanting, and at the core of it is Adivasi tribal music, which is what Debasar used to say. Guru Deva Prasad Das in Odissi dance always used to say Tridhara, the tribal folk and the classical. Classical is, he used to say refined sugar. That is jaggery, and this is refined sugar. Jaggery, we are not excluding jaggery, because if you exclude that, what is The jaggery is grown in the land. That is what makes it regional. If you remove that layer, then there is nothing local about it. It will become a pan-Indian generic tradition. And that is what happens if you take the Bharatanatyam Shastra, you take Sangita Ratnakara and you say, we will sing from this text. You can't, because there is no reference point for that. That is why it is an oral tradition. And therefore it is in our villages, in the tribal villages of Koraput, Koili Kesavo je Mutura Kugola, Kahabole Gola Putra, Bahudi no Ilalo, Koili. Is this music or not? Koili, eta hi Samaveda karaye. What have we done? We musicians have classified it. There are 15 kind of note modulations. This is Tiripagamaka. We are using Tiripagamaka. We know what we are using and where to use what and what it is. We have dissected it and put it together. That doesn't mean the original piece was dissected. Original piece has come from them. The Adivasis still have this tendency. And that is what. All raga, all tala, everything has come from them if you look at it that way.
Prateek,
So now, Satya, how good the question was? Both Thank you. Yes, Mr. Bhubaneswar, you have raised your hand from quite a long time. So please, yes.
Yeah, Namaste, Prateek. Thank you so much for that presentation you did earlier. I have two things to ask, not necessarily question, more of trying to get your opinion on something. What I noticed in recent times, we've seen sudden influx, not sudden, I'm not sure because I haven't been in Odissi scene for long. A lot of usage of Hindustani ragas, especially when it comes to Odissi presentation. So what is your opinion on that? And also recently I've seen one dancer using Carnatic Tilana to dance, to experiment with Odissi. So I'm not saying it's wrong, I just wanted to know, what is your opinion? Are you a purist or do you leave some room for experimentation?
I'm a hardcore purist, but it's not about me. The thing is, the fusion thing that you said, Tilana, Odissi dancing, that is not within the bounds of tradition. So I'm not qualified to comment on it. It is more in the experimental genre and it's somewhere in between on the borders of that. So that is not within the bounds of classical. So it needn't be governed by the classical thing. Whether it in the ritual space it is correct or not is a different discussion. Whether an art form of the temple should be taken and danced to Michael Jackson is a different thing. If you get into that, the tradition maintains that you have to do that. Whether you follow tradition, to what extent you can follow tradition is a different thing. And there are, of course, problems of realism and all that comes in. It is just like in Pattachitra, should you draw zebra or not? See, this visual metaphor always helps. It's a very obvious thing. Do you draw a zebra in Pattachitra? And an excellent artist can derive from the traditional Pattachitra horse and put it together and make it seem like Pattachitra. An excellent artist can do that. Just like in Konark, there is a giraffe in the sculpture, if you see. And that is what makes the art, no? Because the art is not in what has been created. The art is the core is the technique. The technique by which I take even a Carnatic raga and I can sing it. Why Carnatic? I can sing a Chinese melody you give. I can break it down and sing it with Andolita Kurula. That is the expertise of the art form, because the art form has evolved a technique which is a regular technique following the formula of which you can. It is just like Debasar would. A person of Debasar's caliber can take any movement and Odissi fight. And that is also art. That is very much part of the tradition because that has been done by people in earlier parts, not just in Odisha, in all parts of India. In the Sangita Ratnakara, you have a raga called Turushka Todi. Turushka is Turkish. So Turushka, if you can have something Turushka, what is the problem? In Carnatic music, you have a raga called Hejjuji. Hijaz comes from Persian origins. So that is 300 years ago. In Carnatic music tradition, you have compositions inspired by the British bands. What do you notice? Does this have British influence or not? But that is not the point. The artist will always do experiments like this in order to increase the bounds. And then something will fall out, something will fall in, and the artist will themselves know that what has gone outside. Modern Sanskrit prose is being written based on modern topics, but it is still Sanskrit prose because the meter is Sanskrit, the approach is Sanskrit, the phonetics is Sanskrit. It's just like that. Going by this logic, I can sing Charukeshi in a typical. The formula is you. For example, you want to sing a Hindustani raga Charukeshi. Charukeshi is a Carnatic raga that was adapted into Hindustani music several decades ago. So now the problem is, how do you sing Charukeshi in an Odissi idiom? There is an old formula for that. Just like I said, giraffe, you look at horse and you draw, you look at a raga that is allied to Charukeshi. That is in the old repertoire. Then you piece it out. Then you bring that phrase here, bring another phrase here, join it. That's all. That is this formula works. This formula earlier people have done. The thing is, there has to be a percentage. There has to be, what are the authentic should be 80%. This adapted thing should be 20%. But the art of adaptation is part of the tradition itself. That I support. But when you see this proportion going off, then that's not a good sign. But that is the case everywhere in India now. Because Hindustani, you will find more Carnatic ragas. Carnatic, you will find people are singing Desh and Tilak Kamod and Charukeshi and all Hindustani ragas. Hindustani, Kirwani has become totally Hindustani now. The thing is the Hindustani Kirwani Carnatic Kirwani? No, it's not. Any sensible musician will tell you that the Kirwani of South India is totally not comparable to the Kirwani of North India. It's totally not comparable to the Kirwani of Odisha. So that it's the art of adaptation, and one needs to be a master to adapt. That goes without saying. And if any random person adapts, then you will have problems.
Yeah, agreed. I just have one last question. You don't have to answer it straight away. I was wondering if maybe in future talks you could share something on the Sabdaswara Pata that is prominently used in the Debuji's school of Odissi, like how it originated and why Debuji wanted specifically to maintain that style in the composition.
I've shared a video recently. In our lineage, again, there is a thing called Sadango Alapo, the 6 limbs of Alapo, or the elaboration of raga. There we will do Akar Alapo. We will do normal Alapo, Akaro. Then we will use what is called Tenaka. Tum tederi na na ta na te na. This was there. Then you have Pato Alapo, which is the Pallavi. You use percussive syllables to sing. And then you have Chanda Alapo or Shloka Alapo, where comes the shlokas that I was singing are set to specific meters. Sabdaswara Pato is nothing but the reproduction of it's metrical poetry. It's poetry that is obsessed with meter. Because the beat goes. You don't need a tala for that, because the meter itself will give the rhythm for that. I've just shared a video of this recently. This is in Odia, written in a Sanskritic, classical Sanskrit meter, and being Sabdaswara Pata is exactly this. If you look at the examples of the talas in the Sangita Narayana and Gita Prakasha, for each tala, they will give an example of a small metrical line, which when read with the proper Guru Laghu rules, will automatically reflect the swing of the tala. That's how the Sabdaswara Pata is linked with this Chanda Alapa portion of this Sadanga Alapa. Then obviously there is the Bachanika thing which I demonstrated. And then there is Gadya Alapa, in which prose is sung. Srimati Radhika Eparibhasante Sri Krishnam ka Egita Rachana. This is a line. This is a prose line. But this was also part of the tradition. In the Champu, this was sung. So it doesn't matter the language is Odia or Sanskrit. The thing is prose. The thing with Chandalapa is meter. Sabdaswara is under that. I hope that was satisfactory.
Yes. Thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you, Bhubaneswaranji. Now, Asutosh Mr. Agya join करसंती मु अनुरोध करिवि आशुतोष आज्ञा को निजर ऑडियो वीडियो दीटा को अनम्यूट करिकि निज प्रश्न करे आपे
जय जगन्नाथ प्रतीक जय जगन्नाथ मु खूब सौभाग्यवंत आपन ठारु श्रवण करिथिबारु दीर्घ 5 वर्ष धरी सकाळ उठले ଆପଣଙ୍କର ସେ ମଥୁରା ମଙ୍ଗଳର ମଙ୍ଗଳାଚରଣ ମୋ ନିଦ ଭାଙ୍ଗେ ମୋ ଫୋନ ର ରିଙ୍ଗଟୋନ ଆଜି ବି ସେଇଟା ତେଣୁ ମୁଁ ବିଦଗ୍ଧ ଶ୍ରୋତା ଭବଦୀୟ ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ମହାପ୍ରଭୁଙ୍କ କୃପା ବାରି ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ନିରନ୍ତର ବର୍ଷା ହଉ ଏହା ହିଁ ଶ୍ରୀ ଚରଣରେ ଅଳି। ଗୋଟିଏ ମୋର ସାଧାରଣ ପ୍ରଶ୍ନ ଥିଲା, ପ୍ରଶ୍ନ ନୁହେଁ ମୋ ମନର ଏହା ଭାବ। ଆମ ମହାପ୍ରଭୁ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ଓଡ଼ିଆ ଜାତିର ଭାଷାର ସଂସ୍କୃତିର ସର୍ବୋପରି ନୃତ୍ୟ ଏବଂ ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ମୂଳାଧାର। ଯଦି ଶ୍ରୀମନ୍ଦିରରେ ମହାପ୍ରଭୁଙ୍କ ନିକଟରେ ଯେଉଁ ବୈଦିକ ପଦ୍ଧତିରେ ଆମର ଯୋଉ ଦୁଇ ପ୍ରକାର ଅର୍ଚ୍ଚନା ପଦ୍ଧତି ଅଛି ବୈଖାନସ ଏବଂ ପଞ୍ଚରାତ୍ର ଏଇ ଦୁଇ ପଦ୍ଧତିରେ ମହାପ୍ରଭୁଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ଅତି ପ୍ରାଚୀନ କାଳରୁ ଯେଉଁ ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ସେବା ପ୍ରଦାନ କରାଯାଉଥିଲା ଯାହା ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ବିଲୁପ୍ତ ହେଇଯାଇଛି ଆଉ ପରିପ୍ରଚାର ହେଇପାରୁନି, ମହାପ୍ରଭୁ ଆଉ ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ସେବା ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିପାରୁନାହାନ୍ତି। ଯଦି ମହାପ୍ରଭୁ ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିନେବେ ବା ମହାପ୍ରଭୁ ଯଦି ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ସେବା ହବ ତାହେଲେ ଜଗତ ବା ସମଗ୍ର ଜଗତରେ ଓଡ଼ିଶୀ ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ପ୍ରଚାର ପ୍ରସାର ଘଟିବ। ଯୋଉଠି ନାଥ ସନ୍ତୁଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଯିବେ, ଜଗତର ନାଥ ଯାହାକୁ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବେ ତାକୁ ଜଗତ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବ, ଏହା ମୋର ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିଗତ ଭାବ। ତେଣୁ ଶ୍ରୀମନ୍ଦିରରେ ଓଡ଼ିଶୀ ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ସେବା ମାନେ ମହାପ୍ରଭୁ ଯୋଉ ଗୀତ ଗୋବିନ୍ଦଠୁ ଶୁଭାରମ୍ଭ କରି ଯାହା ଆମର ମାହାରୀ ଭିତର ଗାଉଣୀ ଏବଂ ବାହାର ଗାଉଣୀଙ୍କର ସେବା ଥିଲା ତା ନିମନ୍ତେ କିଛି ପଦକ୍ଷେପ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରାଯାଇପାରେ କି?
ନିଶ୍ଚୟ ପ୍ରଶାସନ ଏହା କରିବା କଥା, କିନ୍ତୁ ଦୁର୍ଭାଗ୍ୟ ବିଣାକାର ପରମ୍ପରା ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ 94 ରେ ଶେଷ ବିଣାକାର ଚାଲିଗଲେ। ମୁଁ କହୁଛି କେମିତି ବିଲୁପ୍ତ ହୁଏ ବୋଲି। ମାଦେଳି ସେବା ପୁରୀରେ ଅଦ୍ୟାବଧି ଗୋଟେ ଶାଢୀ ବନ୍ଧା ହେଇକି ହଉଛି ବୋଲି ମୁଁ ଅନୁମାନ କରୁନାହିଁ ମୋର ସୀମିତ ଜ୍ଞାନ ଭିତରେ। ପୁରୀରେ ମର୍ଦଳକାରଙ୍କର କୌଣସି ଅଭାବ ନାହିଁ ଅଦ୍ୟାବଧି। ପୁରୀ ଭଳିଆ ଯୋଉଠି ପ୍ରାଚୁର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଅଛି ମର୍ଦଳର ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରଧାନ ପୀଠ ପୁରୀ ସିଂହାରୀ ସାରଙ୍କ ପରମ୍ପରାରେ ମର୍ଦଳର ଏତେ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱ ଏବଂ ଏତେ ଚାତୁର୍ଯ୍ୟପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ବାଦନ ପୁରୀର ବୈଶିଷ୍ଟ୍ୟ ସେ ଜିନିଷଟି ଦେଉଳରେ ନ ବାଜି ଅନ୍ୟ କଥାଟି ବି ହେଇଛି। ବୈଦେଶିକ ବାଦ୍ୟ ପଶୁଛି ଦେଉଳରେ ଯୋଉଟା କି ପଶିବା କଥା ନୁହେଁ। ଦେଉଳର ଯଦି ଶିଷ୍ଟତାକୁ ଦେଖିବା ବୈଦେଶିକ ବାଦ୍ୟ ଦେଉଳ ଭିତରେ ପଶିବା କଥା ନୁହେଁ। ଠିକ ସମାନ ତର୍କରେ ବୈଦେଶିକ ପରିବା ଯୋଉ ତର୍କରେ ପଶୁନି ବୈଦେଶିକ ପଦାର୍ଥ କାହିଁକି ପଶିବ? ତେଣୁ ମର୍ଦଳ ଥାଉଣୁ ତବଲା ପଶିବା କି ବୀଣା ଥାଉଣୁ ସିତାର ପଶିବା। ପୁରୀର ଲୋକାଲ ଅଠରନଳା ପାଖରେ ବିଣାକାର ଲୋକ ଥିଲେ, ସେ ଲାଷ୍ଟ ତାଙ୍କ ନାତି ବଞ୍ଚିଛନ୍ତି ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ। ତାଙ୍କ ନାତି କହୁଛନ୍ତି ବାପା କହୁଥିଲେ ଦେଖିଛନ୍ତି ବୋଲି। ଆପଣ ଭାବନ୍ତୁ ଗାୟଣୀ ପରମ୍ପରା ଚାଲିଗଲା। ଦେବଦାସୀ ମାନେ ଥିଲାବେଳେ ଗାୟଣୀ ପରମ୍ପରାଟା ବିଧିବଦ୍ଧ ଶିକ୍ଷା ତ କରାଯାଇ ପାରିଥାନ୍ତା, ଗୋଟେ ୱାର୍କସପ୍ କରିକି ଶିଖେଇଥାନ୍ତେ, କଣ ବଡ କଥା।
ନିଶ୍ଚିତ
ନୃତ୍ୟ ପରମ୍ପରାଟି ବହୁ ଦୂର ଯାଏ ସଂଗ୍ରହ ହେଇଯାଇଛି, ତାହା ମାନେ ଭଲ କଥା। ଗାୟଣୀ ପରମ୍ପରା ବିଲୁପ୍ତରେ ଆମେ ଦୁଃଖିତ ଅବଶ୍ୟ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଯାହା ହଉ ସିଂହାରୀ ସାରଙ୍କ ପରମ୍ପରାରେ ଯେହେତୁ ସେ ବି ଦେଉଳ ପରମ୍ପରା, ସିଂହାରୀ ସାର ଯେହେତୁ ଅନେକ ଦେବଦାସୀ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଶିଖଉଥିଲେ ମଧ୍ୟ, ତେଣୁ ସେ ପରମ୍ପରାର ଉପାଦାନ ଗୁଡିକ ଅଦ୍ୟାବଧି ଉପଲବ୍ଧ ଅଛି, ଶୈଳୀ ବି ଉପଲବ୍ଧ ଅଛି। ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଝୁଲଣ ତ ପୁରା ଡିଷ୍ଟର୍ବ ହେଇଗଲା। ଝୁଲଣଟି ମୁଖ୍ୟ ଥିଲା ଗଞ୍ଜାମ ପୁରୀର ଆଦାନ ପ୍ରଦାନ ଝୁଲଣରେ ହଉଥିଲା। ମଠ ମନ୍ଦିର ଇକୋସିଷ୍ଟମ ଟି ଖସିଯିବା ହିଁ ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ଅବଲୁପ୍ତିର ପ୍ରଧାନ। ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ଅବଲୁପ୍ତି ହବ ନାହିଁ, ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ସ୍ତର ରହିବ, ମଞ୍ଚ ପ୍ରଦର୍ଶନାତ୍ମକ ହେଇଯିବ, ଯାହାକି ଓଡିଶାର ପରମ୍ପରାର ବିରୋଧୀ। ଦୈବ ସମର୍ପଣ ଭାବ ଯୋଉଟା ଅନ୍ଧ ଆପନା ପାଣିଗ୍ରାହୀ ପାରଳାର ମଠରେ ବସିକି ଗାଉଥିଲେ ସବୁବେଳେ। ଗୋପାଳ କୃଷ୍ଣ କେବଳ ମଠରେ ବସିକି ଗାଉଥିଲେ, କେବେ ଷ୍ଟେଜରେ ବସିକି ଗାଉନଥିଲେ। ଷ୍ଟେଜ କନସେପ୍ଟ କୁ ବହିଷ୍କାର କରୁଥିଲେ ଗାୟକ ଲୋକ, ଯେହେତୁ ତାଙ୍କର ଆଗ୍ରହ ହିଁ ନାହିଁ ସେଇଟା ପ୍ରତି। ଗୋପାଳ କୃଷ୍ଣ ତ ନିଜ ରଚନାକୁ ଲେଖୁ ବି ନଥିଲେ, ଏଇଟା ବିଦିତ। ନିଜ ରଚନାକୁ ଲେଖୁନଥିଲେ, ତାଙ୍କ ପଛରେ ଜଣେ ଛୋଟ ପିଲା ଗୋଡେଇ ଗୋଡେଇ ଲେଖୁଥିଲା। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଧାରାର ଅବଶ୍ୟ ମଞ୍ଚ ପ୍ରଦର୍ଶନ ପରମ୍ପରା ବି ରହିଛି, ଯୋଉଟା ଆମେ ଉଦୟଗିରି ଖଣ୍ଡଗିରି ଦେଖୁଛେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ସିଏ ତା ବାଟେ ଚାଲୁ, ଇଏ ଆ ବାଟେ ଚାଲୁ। ଏଇଥିରେ କଣ ଉଭୟ ରହିଲେ ହିଁ ତାର ସମୃଦ୍ଧିଟା ରହିବ, ନହେଲେ ତାର ଯୋଉ ଗାମ୍ଭୀର୍ଯ୍ୟଟି କୋଉଠି ଗୋଟେ ପାଣି ଚିଆଯିବ, ଯୋଉଟା ସବୁଠି ହଉଛି ଭାରତରେ। କେବଳ ବୋଧେ କହିବାକୁ ପଡିବ ଦକ୍ଷିଣ ଭାରତରେ ସେମାନେ ଭାରି କନସିୟସ୍ ଏ ଦିଗରେ। ତାଙ୍କ ମନ୍ଦିର ପରମ୍ପରାରେ ଏବେ ବି ସେମାନେ ଯେତେ ବଡ ଶିଳ୍ପୀ ହଉ
ପାଖରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସୁରକ୍ଷିତ ଅଛି, ନାଥ ଦ୍ୱାରରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସୁରକ୍ଷିତ ଅଛି।
ନାଥ ଦ୍ୱାରରେ ଦେଉଳରେ ବୋଲା ହଉଛି ସିଂହାରୀ ସାର ଯୋଉ ମାଜଣା ମଣ୍ଡପ କରିଦେଲେ, ମାଜଣା ମଣ୍ଡପ ପରମ୍ପରାଟି ଚାଲିଛି, କିନ୍ତୁ କୋରୋନା ପରଠୁ ମାଜଣା ମଣ୍ଡପଟି ବହୁତ ବିଚ୍ଛିନ୍ନ ହେଇଯାଇଛି, ତାର ଶିଥିଳ ହେଇଯାଇଛି। ସେ ମାଜଣା ମଣ୍ଡପ ଯଦି ବିଧିବଦ୍ଧ ଆପଏଣ୍ଟମେଣ୍ଟ ହୁଅନ୍ତା ଲୋକଙ୍କର କିଛି ଆପତ୍ତି ବୋଲି ମୁଁ ଭାବୁନାହିଁ। ଲୋକ ବରଂ ଖୁସିରେ ଯାଇକି ଓଡିଶାରେ ବସିବ। ଓଡିଶୀ ନୃତ୍ୟରେ ବି ପଦକ୍ଷେପ କରିବାକୁ କେତେ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କରାଗଲା, ହେଲା ନାହିଁ। କିନ୍ତୁ ଗୀତରେ ହୁଏତ ହେଇପାରିବ। ଗୀତରେ ପୁଣି ଶୁଦ୍ଧି ଆବଶ୍ୟକ, ଯେମିତି ଷ୍ଟେଜରେ ଯାହା ହେଲେ ଗାଇଦବ, ଦିଅଙ୍କ ଆଗରେ ଗାଇଲେ ଯୋଉ ସୂଚିମନ୍ତ ଗାୟନ, ସେ ଜିନିଷଟା ହୁଏତ କରାଯାଇ ପାରିବ। ପ୍ରଶାସନର ଏଇ ଦିଗରେ କାହିଁ इनटांजिबल रे आग्रह नहीं, टांजिबल रे बेसी आग्रह प्रशासन।
निश्चय आपन बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आपण प्राय 2 घंटा ऊर्ध्व काल धरी संगीतर व्याख्यान करूचंती। मु श्री चरण प्रार्थना करूचे एमती मुहुर्मुहु ओडिसी संगीतर ओडिया भाषार सेवा करंत। महाप्रभु दया रही था। जय जगन्नाथ।
संजय भाई आज्ञा
अति आम मानकर दुख जे आम भाषा शास्त्रीय हो गला, आम नृत्य भी शास्त्रीय हो गला, किंतु आम संगीत एपर्यंत शास्त्रीय हो पारानी। कथा
शास्त्रीय अच्छी मान्यता जो सरकारी स्टाम्प बड़ाए।
हाँ से मु कहूची जमती आमर ओडिया भाषा को शास्त्रीय मान्यता देवाई विभिन्न क्राइटेरिया थिला, जमती 1500 वर्ष रु 2000 वर्ष पुराना ही थिबो। सेमती शास्त्रीय संगीत पई क्राइटेरिया कौन सब अच्छी सेगुड़ाक जदि अच्छी सेगुड़ाक आम ओडिसी संगीत से गुड़ा क्राइटेरिया गुड़ा फुलफिल करुच्ची कि जदि फुलफिल करुच्ची मु तुमको अनुरोध करी तुम्हें सेगुड़ाक गोटी गोटी के पॉइंट वाइज ताको ये कर लेख आर्गुमेंट टाइप रो वी विल फाइल ए सूट, वी विल हैव टू फाइट इट आउट। अदरवाइज कहीं गवर्नमेंट कहीं किछि करिवेनी स्वतः
कहली गवर्नमेंट रो कोनोसी मेथड नहीं कोनोसी संगीत को शास्त्रीय भाबे रिकॉग्नाइज करिया को जेहेतु नृत्य को शास्त्रीय करिया पय गोटे फ्रेमवर्क कराइतला जे ए नियम रे जे उत्तीर्ण हो ताको शास्त्रीय बोली घोषित करिकि ताको विशेष कोन पेट्रोनेज दिया पृष्ठपोषकता दिया हो। से जिनसटी संगीत पय होई नाही जेहेतु कल्चर मिनिस्ट्री करछि जो शास्त्रीय नियमावली नृत्य पय, किंतु संगीत को शास्त्रीय कल्चर मिनिस्ट्री कोउनी जाय कि निकट अतीत रे जाइतिला केंद्र को केंद्र रे से माने जो घोषणा करले संस्कृति मंत्री केंद्र संस्कृति मंत्री से कहले संस्कृति मंत्रालय पक्षरु कौनसी संगीत को शास्त्रीय घोषित कराई नहीं जेतु से माने करिवि नांती घोषणा करिछि आकाशवाणी दूरदर्शन जो गुडा कि इन्फॉर्मेशन ब्रॉडकास्ट अंडर रे अछंती। तेनो इन्फॉर्मेशन ए माने आकाशवाणी रे कला कि से ब्रिटिश आकाशवाणी रे ब्रिटिश अमल रो करा हिछि ब्रिटिश वाला माने करचंती जो विभागीकरण ब्रिटिश माने जो 1880 मसिया रे जो सब नुवा नुवा बही लेखिले ओरिएंटल बही ऑन इंडियन लैंग्वेज म्यूजिक से माने केवल लिखिदेले जे इंडिया रे देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड राग आ गोटे नॉर्थ इंडियन साउथ इंडियन बोली आमे जानिछु तांको पाखरे जेती खबर थिला से लिखिले आ। किंतु जदि आपण जो नियम कहउचंती संगीत पई गोटे नियम हे कि आगो हिंदुस्तानी कर्नाटिक को तो मिलिनी आ से सेटा कहउचंती ये कहउचंती हमर नियम नै संस्कृति आई एंड बी को एक्चुअली धरिया पड़ियो काहे आई एंड बी इज द वन जे के आकाशवाणी रे अनाउंस करछि जे उसे करिवे निखिल भारत शास्त्रीय संगीत समारोह। अच्छा सेथिरे पुणी गुडाए छंद अछि पूर्वरु जेतेबेले संगीत नाटक एकेडमी केंद्र जोटा कि संस्कृति मंत्रालय अंडर रे आसी से गोटे संस्था बट इट इज एन इंडिपेंडेंट बॉडी मोर जते दूर ज्ञान संगीत नाटक एकेडमी रो केंद्र रो जो अवार्ड गुडी को दिया जाए पुरस्कार सेही पुरस्कार गुडी करे जहा लेखा जाए को संदर्भ रे आंको पुरस्कार मिलिला ओडिसी नृत्य ओडिसी गीत लेखा हो ओडिसा रे बहु बाग्मी विद्वान व्यक्ति मान को संगीतज्ञ मान को नृत्य संगीत बोली मिली माने ओडिसी नृत्य रो सहयोगी संगीत एई न्याय रे मिली जहा घोर न्याय नृत्य रे केमि जने संगीतज्ञ संगीतटा संगीत शिखिबो तापर सिना नृत्य रे सेटा साइड काम संगीतज्ञ सेटा प्रधान काम न संगीतज्ञ प्रधान काम गाइबा तेनु ताकू से जो बुले किरी कहबाटा से सही कौशल कले तापरे किछि समय पर कले ट्रेडिशनल म्यूजिक बोली कले अवार्ड निकट रे पंडित गोपाल चंद्र पंडा को जो संगीत नाटक एकेडमी रो पुरस्कार मिलुची सेतरे से लगले अदर मेजर ट्रेडिशंस ऑफ म्यूजिक माने भारतर प्रमुख अन्यान्य प्रमुख संगीत धारा बोली रिकॉग्नाइज करले। अच्छा एबे तो 2011 रे चिन्हिलो आ 1960 रे केमति जानि पर नथलो 1960 रे जानि पर नथलो एबे पुणी मान मेजर ट्रेडिशन बोली से ही रिकॉग्नाइज करले काहे कि जेतु गोपाल सारंकर कामर आधिक्य ए क्षेत्र रे संगीत माने प्योर म्यूजिक क्षेत्र रे से जो कामटी करचंती अवश्य नृत्य संगीत रे भी से गुडाए काम करचंती किंतु से बाध्य है कि माने ए कैटेगरी रे देले ता माने कोन से धीरे धीरे से माने भी जानुचंती किंतु भारत रे जो पद्धति रे डेरी लागे सरकारी पद्धति रे से या होची ताको त्वरान्वित करिया पय निश्चय कोनोसी पदक्षेप माने उच्च पदाधिकारी को चाप इत्यादि जहा भारत रे चले एया तेणु आमर किछि गुण नाइ तांकर किछि उत्तीर्ण करिया को नियम नाइ तांकर जदि नियम करिवे हमर तारिणी पत्र गोटे जगह लिखिचंती जदि प्राचीनता
प्रतीक कटिगला मु कॉल करछु। प्रतीक रीजन करछंती संजय भाई या ऊपर पीआईएल गोटे पकई देले भी होंता कि काहे कि आकाशवाणी
हाँ
एटा एटा कहूनी
नाଇଁ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ପକ୍ଷ କରିକି ଆମେ ପ୍ରଥମେ ଗୋଟେ ଇଏ ଦବା ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଗୋଟେ ଗୋଟେ
आरटीआई भी हो आरटीआई भी तांको मागिया कथा कि
रिप्रेजेंटेशन दବା ଦେଲା
हां
ପରେ ନା ଆରଟିଆଇ ନୁହେଁ ଡାଇରେକ୍ଟ ସବୁ ବୋଲି ତାପରେ ତା ଏଗେନଷ୍ଟ ରେ ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ଫାଇଲ କରିବା ପିଆଇଏଲ ସେମାନେ ଦେଲେ ନାହିଁ ଶୁନାହାନ୍ତି କରିକି ସେଇଟା ପ୍ରତିକି ଅନୁରୋଧ ସେଥିପାଇଁ କରୁଥିଲି ପ୍ରତିକି ଯୋଉ ଆର୍ଗୁମେଣ୍ଟ ଗୁଡାକ ସେଗୁଡାକ ଯଦି ପଏଣ୍ଟ ଆଉଟ କଲା ସେଇଗୁଡାକ ଆମେ ଆଗ ଲେଖିବା ତାପରେ କେସଟି ଫାଇଲ କରିବା ସେ जो ऑल इंडिया रेडियो हो से संगीत नाटक एकेडमी हो कल्चर हो समस्त के पक्ष करके गोटे केस टे फाइल करवा सेटा ही इजीएस्ट नले आमे तांको खुशामत करी परियानी तांको फाइटिंग करी करबा को ही पड़िबो से समस्त के देबे जदी देई नांती समस्त के से डिक्लेयर
से
करिवे
डिक्लेयर कर दे देना
काई
बोले
करूना कि
डिक्लेरेशन नहीं जाई बट फ्रॉम डिफरेंट मिनिस्ट्री हम कल्चरल मिनिस्ट्री डिक्लेयर कर देछि एटा आकाशवाणी अगेंस्ट रे माने आईबी अगेंस्ट रे गोटे आरटीआई रे ही आई थिंक काम होई जिवो काहे कि दोनो
आमे
तार कारण
डायरेक्ट ताको पक्ष करी गोटे केस टे कर देबा डायरेक्ट
हां प्रतीक
जनस्वार्थ
तमे
मामला करबा
प्रतीक कंटिन्यू
ହଁ ଏଇଆ ଆଉ ଆକାଶବାଣୀର ଯଦି ଜାତୀୟ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକ୍ରମରେ ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ନାଟକ ଏକାଡେମୀ ମଧ୍ୟ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଓଡିଶା ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ସବୁ ରଖୁଛି
प्रत्येक सेटपाई मोर अनुरोध तुमको तुम से जो आमर आर्गुमेंट गुड़ाक शास्त्रीय कहीं एटा हेबो तेणु से आर्गुमेंट गुड़ाक तुम सब पॉइंट आउट करके सब नोट डाउन कले आमे ताको सब डिपार्टमेंट को जनइबा जो जो कंसर्न
ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ,
डिपार्टमेंट
ପୁରା ନଥି ହେଇକି କେନ୍ଦ୍ରକୁ ବାରମ୍ବାର ପଠା ହେଇସାରିଛି ପୁରା ଏକ୍ସପର୍ଟ
पठाई
କମିଟି ନଥି କରିକି ଆଉ ସେ ନଥି ପୁରାପୁରି ନିର୍ଭୁଲ ସେଥିରେ ସବୁ ବିଶେଷଜ୍ଞ ମାନେ କାମ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ମାନେ ମାଷ୍ଟର ପିସ୍ ଗୋଟେ ନଥି ହେଇଛି ଏବଂ ଯୋଉ ନିୟମ କଥା କହୁଥିଲେ ଯଦି ନିୟମ କରାଯାଏ ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀୟତା ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ଆମର ତାରିଣୀ ପାତ୍ର ଗୋଟେ ଜାଗାରେ ଲେଖିଛନ୍ତି ଭାରତୀୟ ସଙ୍ଗୀତର ଧାରା ଦେଖିଲେ ଓଡିଶୀ ସର୍ବପୁରାତନ ତାପରେ କର୍ଣ୍ଣାଟକୀ ତାପରେ ହିନ୍ଦୁସ୍ତାନୀ କିନ୍ତୁ ଶୋଇଲା ପୁଅର ଭାଗ ନାହିଁ ଏଇଆ ଲେଖିଛନ୍ତି
तेणु से गोटे सजेसन आमे गोटे केस टे फाइल करबा
ହଁ ହଁ ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ତାଙ୍କର ନିୟମାବଳୀ ହବ ଏଇଆ
सुप्रीम
ତ
कोर्ट रे गोटे केस टे फाइल
ଆକାଶବାଣୀ
तमे से
କରିଦେଲେ ହେଇଗଲା ଆଉ
पेपर
କେହି
वर्क
ନାହିଁ।
गुडा
ଆକାଶବାଣୀ ଏବଂ
पेपर वर्क गुडा तमे
ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ
रेडी
କଥାଟି
करो
ବି କହିବି ଆମର ଗୁରୁ ଗୋପୀନାଥ
हां
ସ୍ୱାଇଁ ଯେ ନିକଟରେ ପଦ୍ମଶ୍ରୀ ପାଇଲେ ତାଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ଆବେଦନ ପତ୍ରଟି ମୁଁ ଫାଇଲ କରିଥିଲି ଗୋପୀନାଥ ସାର୍ ହେଲେ ଆଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ତାରିଣୀ ପାତ୍ରଙ୍କର ଷ୍ଟୁଡେଣ୍ଟ ମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରୁ ଜଣେ ତାଙ୍କର ଅନ୍ୟ ଗୁରୁ ମାନଙ୍କର ଅନ୍ୟମୟ ଅଛନ୍ତି କିନ୍ତୁ ସେ ଯୋଉ କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳା ଗାନ କରନ୍ତି ଗଞ୍ଜାମରେ ସେ କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳା ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀୟ କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳା ତାହା ଓଡିଶୀ ରାଗରାଗିଣୀ ଆଧାରିତ କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳା ତାହା ଏମିତି ନର୍ମାଲ ମାନେ କଣ କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳାର ମଧ୍ୟ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାର ଅଛି ଗୋଟେ ଭାବ ବିନୋଦିଆ ଠାକୁର ଭକ୍ତ ବତ୍ସଳ ହରି ଏଇଟା ଅଛି ଏ ଜିନିଷକୁ ମୁଁ ଉଣା କହୁନାହିଁ କିନ୍ତୁ ଏଇଟା ରାଗର ଜନନୀ ନିଶ୍ଚିତ କିନ୍ତୁ ରାଗରାଗିଣୀର ମାପ ଭିତରେ ଥିବା ଯୋଉ ଫର୍ମ ଗୁଡାକ ଗୋପୀନାଥ ସାର୍ ଯୋଉଟା ଗାଆନ୍ତି ମୁଁ ତାଙ୍କ ଆବେଦନ ପତ୍ରରେ ସ୍ପଷ୍ଟ ଭାବେ ଲେଖିଥିଲି କ୍ଲାସିକାଲ କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳା ବୋଲି କ୍ଲାସିକାଲ କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳା ବେସ୍ଡ ଅନ୍ ଓଡିଶୀ ମ୍ୟୁଜିକ ବୋଲି ମୁଁ ଲେଖିଥିଲି ତାଙ୍କୁ ଏୱାର୍ଡ ମିଳିଛି ଭଜନ ଫୋକ୍ ମ୍ୟୁଜିକ ଭଜନ ତେଣୁ କେହି ଗୋଟେ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ କରୁଛି ସେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବାକୁ ନାରାଜ ସେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା ଯଦି ହେଇଥାନ୍ତା ଉତ୍ତର ଭାରତୀୟ କଣ କିଏ ସେ କରିଥାନ୍ତା କି କରିନଥାନ୍ତା ଆଚ୍ଛା ଭଜନ ବୋଲି କିଏ ଡିସାଇଡ କଲା କୃଷ୍ଣଲୀଳା ଟା ଭଜନ ବୋଲି କିଏ ସେ ନିଷ୍ପତ୍ତି ଟା ନେଲା ଗୋଟେ ଅନଭିଜ୍ଞ ଲୋକ ନେଲା ନିହାତି ଏଇଭଳି କଥା ଆଉ ଏଇ ଜିନିଷଟାକୁ ପ୍ରତିହତ କରିବାକୁ ପଡିବ ଗୋଟେ ବାୟସଟି ରହୁଛି କେନ୍ଦ୍ର ପକ୍ଷରୁ ଆମର କିଛି ଉଣା ନାହିଁ ମାନେ ଆମର
ନାଇଁ से
4 ପିଢି 5 ପିଢି ଗୁରୁ ଚାଲିଗଲେ ଜଗି ଜଗି ଆଉ ଆମର ଉଣା କଣ ଆମର ତ ବରଂ ମୁଁ କହିଲି ପରା ଆମର
ନାଇଁ
ରକ୍ଷଣଶୀଳ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ଗଲେ ଆମର ବେଶୀ ଉପାଦାନ ଅଛି
ना से हमको फाइट इट आउट तेणु आमको तब से डॉक्यूमेंट सब रेडी करो वी विल फाइल ए सूट इन सुप्रीम कोर्ट
हाँ निश्चित
हेलो प्रतीक
प्रतीक प्रतीक वीडियो ऑफ रखछनी किंतु ये ऑन अछि वॉइस ऑन अछि से हां निश्चित कहले
हाँ प्रतीक से तेणु आम प्रिपेरेसन बर्तमान सेया करबा आमे खाली मीटिंग रे रहबानी तेणु आगु को भी किछ करबा ତେଣୁ ମୁଁ 7-8 ବର୍ଷ ତଳେ ଲେଖିକି ବ୍ୟାନର ଫ୍ୟାନର ଲେଖି ଗୋଟେ କରିଥିଲି ସମାରୋହ। ବହୁତ ଲୋକ ମତେ ଥଟ୍ଟା କଲେ, କହିଲେ ଓଡିଶୀ ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀୟ ସଙ୍ଗୀତ କେବେ ହେଲା, କାହିଁକି ମତେ ଥଟ୍ଟା କଲେ। ମୁଁ କିନ୍ତୁ କିଛି ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀୟ ମହୋତ୍ସବ ଚଲେଇଥିଲି। ତେଣୁ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ସମୟ ଆସି ଯାଇଛି, ଆମକୁ କିଛି ନାହିଁ କାହାକୁ ଖୁସାମତ କରିବାର ଯୁଗ ସରିଯାଇଛି। ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଆମେ ସିଧାସଳଖ ଯଦି ପିଟିସନ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଅଲରେଡି ଦିଆଯାଇଛି ତାଙ୍କୁ ଲେଖିକି, ଏବଂ ସେମାନେ ତାପରେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ନେଇନାହାନ୍ତି, ତେଣୁ ସେ ଦିଆଯାଇଛି ସେ ଚିଠିର ଇଏ ଅଛି କି, ପ୍ରମାଣ ଅଛି କି ସବୁ
ହଁ ପ୍ରମାଣ
କୋଉ ଡେଟ୍ ରେ କଣ
ପ୍ରମାଣ ଯେତିକି କମ୍ପିଲେସନ ହେଇଛି
ଦିଆ
ଓଡିଶାରେ,
ହେଇଥିଲା
ଆଉ
ତାର
କୋଉ ଅଞ୍ଚଳରେ ଏତିକି ପ୍ରମାଣ କମ୍ପିଲେସନ ହେଇନଥିବ। କାହିଁକି ଆମର ବହୁତ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ପ୍ରମାଣ ଅଛି ନା, ଆମର ତାଳପତ୍ର ପୃଥି ସର୍ବାଧିକ, ଆମର ମନ୍ଦିର ସର୍ବାଧିକ, ଆମର ଯୋଉ ଟାଇପ ର ପ୍ରମାଣ ମିଳୁଛି ସେ ଶୈଳୀର ପ୍ରମାଣ ସବୁଠି ମିଳିବନି, ଆଉ ଏତେ
ନାଇଁ
ଶାନ୍ତ
ସେତେଟା
ଭାବରେ
ନୁହେଁ।
କୋଉଠି ମିଳେ ନାହିଁ।
ନା ଆଇ ଥିଙ୍କ ପ୍ରତୀକ ସଞ୍ଜୟ ଭାଇ ଯୋଉ ପଚାରୁଛନ୍ତି କି ଆଗରୁ ଆମେ ରିକ୍ୱେଷ୍ଟ କରିଛେ କି
ହଁ ହଁ
ଆପ୍ଲିକେସନ ତାର ପ୍ରମାଣ
ହଁ ହଁ
ସେ
application
କଥା ମୁଁ
ବହୁତ
କହୁନି, ମାନେ ସେ ରେଜିଷ୍ଟ୍ରେସନ ଯୋଉ କରିଛେ ଡକ୍ୟୁମେଣ୍ଟ ଚିଠି ପଠେଇଛେ ସେଗୁଡାକରେ କିଛି ଅଛି କି ନା ଏବେ ଫ୍ରେଶ କରିବା ନହେଲେ?
ସବୁ ଅଛି, ମୁଁ ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ କହିଦେବି ଯୋଉମାନେ ସେ କମିଟିରେ ଥିଲେ, ତେଣୁ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆପଣ ପରାମର୍ଶ କଲେ ଆପଣ କରିପାରିବେ। ସଙ୍ଗୀତା ମ୍ୟାଡାମ ଯେମିତି ଗତଥର କହୁଥିଲେ, ତାଙ୍କ ଅନୁଷ୍ଠାନ ବି ଗୁଡାଏ ଥର ସେଥିରେ ସଂଲଗ୍ନ ଥିଲା, ତାଙ୍କ ଅନୁଷ୍ଠାନ ଏବଂ ଡକ୍ଟର କୀର୍ତ୍ତନ ନାରାୟଣ ପାଢୀ ପ୍ରସିଦ୍ଧ ଗବେଷକ ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ତତ୍ତ୍ୱବିଦ, ସେମାନେ ଆଗ
ପ୍ରତୀକି,
ଧାଡିରେ ଏଇ
ତୁମେ ତ
ଯୋଉ
ଆମ ସାଥିରେ ଅଛ, ତମେ ତ
ନା ନା କହିବା ଉଦ୍ଦେଶ୍ୟ ହେଲା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଦାବି ଯାଇଛି ପ୍ରପର କମିଟିରୁ
ଆମ
ଫାଇଲ
ସାଥିରେ ଅଛ, ତେଣୁ ଆମେ
ଯାଇଛି।
ତମକୁ ନେଇକି ଯେ ସେ ତାଙ୍କଠୁ ଆଣିବା, ସେ ଯୋଉ କେବେ ରେଜିଷ୍ଟ୍ରେସନ କରିଥିଲେ ଚିଠି ପଠେଇଥିଲେ ସେଗୁଡାକ ଖୋଜିବା ମୁସ୍କିଲ। ଆମେ ଏବେ ପଠେଇଦବା, ସେ ତ ଟାଇମ ଦିଆଯାଏ କେତେ ମାସେ 15 ଦିନ ଏମିତି ଟାଇମ ଦେଲା ପରେ ସେମାନେ ଯଦି ଆମେ ଦବା ଯେ ଏତିକି ଦିନ ଭିତରେ କରନ୍ତୁ, ଯଦି ସେତିକି ଦିନ ଭିତରେ ନଦେଲା ପରେ ଆମେ ଆସିଯିବ, ଆମର କେସ୍ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ରାଇଟ୍ ଆସିଯିବ, ଆମେ ଡାଇରେକ୍ଟ
ପ୍ରଧାନ
ଫାଇଲ କରିବା।
ପ୍ରଧାନ ପଦକ୍ଷେପ ହେଲା ଆକାଶବାଣୀରେ କାହିଁକି ପ୍ରସାରିତ ହଉନି ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀୟ ବ୍ୟାନରରେ। ଆକାଶବାଣୀରେ ଗୋଟେ ଓଡିଶୀ ଗାୟକ ଗଲେ, ଯେପରି ମ୍ୟାଡାମ ଗତଥର କହୁଥିଲେ 15 ମିନିଟ ଗାଇବାକୁ କହିବେ, 15 ମିନିଟ ହିନ୍ଦୁସ୍ତାନୀ ଘଣ୍ଟାଟି ସ୍ଲଟ ଦିଆଯିବ। ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଘଣ୍ଟାଟି କଣ ଗାଇବା ଯୋଗ୍ୟ ଲୋକ କଣ ନଥିଲେ କି 1960-70 ସବୁ ଥିଲେ, ତାଙ୍କ ଆଜୀବନ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଦିଆ ହିଁ ଗଲାନି ସେ ସ୍ଲଟ। ମୁଁ ଜାଣିଛି ଆମର ସେଇ, ମୁଁ ଖାଲି କହୁଛି ଆପଣ ଭାବିବେନି ଆମ ଗୁରୁ ପରମ୍ପରା କଥା ଅଧିକା କହୁଛି ବୋଲି, ମୁଁ ଯାହା ସେତିକି ଶୁଣିଛି କହୁଛି। ଆମ ସାରଙ୍କ ସାର୍ ପ୍ରାଇଭେଟଲି ଷ୍ଟେଜରେ ଗାଇଲା ବେଳେ ଘଣ୍ଟା ଘଣ୍ଟା ଆଳାପ କରୁଥିଲେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ରେଡିଓରେ ତାଙ୍କର ପ୍ରୋଗ୍ରାମ ବାହାରିଛି, ଆମେ ଚିଠା ଦେଖୁଛୁ, ତାଙ୍କ ରେଡିଓରେ ବାହାରିଛି 15 ମିନିଟ ରାଗ ମଙ୍ଗଳ, 15 ମିନିଟ ରାଗ ଦେଶାକ୍ଷର, ଏମିତି। ଏଇ ଯୋଉ 15 ମିନିଟ ବାହାରିଛି, ଯୋଉ ଲୋକଟି, ଆଚ୍ଛା 15 ମିନିଟରୁ ଦିନକୁ 10ଟା-15ଟା ସ୍ଲଟ, ମାନେ କଣ ହେଲା, ସେ ସେସବୁ ସେଇ 3 ଘଣ୍ଟା ହେଲା। ତମେ 15 ମିନିଟରେ 10ଟା ସ୍ଲଟରେ 10ଟା ରାଗ ଲେଖା ହବ, ସେଇଥିରେ ପୁଣି ସେ ଆକାଶବାଣୀ କର୍ତ୍ତୃପକ୍ଷ କହୁଥିବ ତମେ ସେଇ ରାଗଟା କାହିଁକି ବଜଉଛ, ତମେ ଟିକେ ବଜଉନ ହିନ୍ଦୁସ୍ତାନୀ ରାଗ ଗୋଟେ ବଜଉନ, ଏଇ ସବୁ କଥା ଗୁଡାକ, ଏଗୁଡା ଅଶୋଭନୀୟ କଥା, ଏଗୁଡାକ ଆଉ କୋଉଠି ହଉନି। ଏବେ ହିନ୍ଦୁସ୍ତାନୀ ଜଣେ ଅଡିସନ ଦବାକୁ ଯିବ, ତାକୁ ଯଦି କୁହାଯିବ ତୁ ଗୋଟେ ଓଡିଶୀ ରାଗ ବଜା, ସେ କଣ ବଜେଇଦବ? ଅଯଥା ଅନ୍ୟାୟ ମୁଣ୍ଡ ବଥା। ତେଣୁ ତାରିଣୀ ଚରଣ ପାତ୍ରଙ୍କ କାଲିବରର ଲୋକକୁ ଯଦି ତାଙ୍କର ଆଜିକା ଡେଟରେ 1970 ମସିହାରେ ସେ ଯୋଉ ଏତେ ବଜେଇଛନ୍ତି, ବୀଣା ବଜେଇଛନ୍ତି, ଗାଇଛନ୍ତି, ତାଙ୍କର ମାନଙ୍କର ରେକର୍ଡିଂ ଥାନ୍ତା, ଘଣ୍ଟାଟି ଗୋଟେ ରାଗର ଆଳାପ, କି ଅମୂଲ୍ୟ ନିଧି ହେଇଥାନ୍ତା, ସେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଦେଲେ ନାହିଁ ସେ ସୁଯୋଗ। ଏପରିକି ତାଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ଇଣ୍ଟରଭ୍ୟୁ ବି ହେଇଛି ସରକାରର ଆଇଏନବି ଡିପାର୍ଟମେଣ୍ଟ, ଏଗେନ ପ୍ରସାର ଭାରତୀ, ଆକାଶବାଣୀ, ଦୂରଦର୍ଶନ, ଉତ୍ତର ଭାରତ ଏବଂ ଦକ୍ଷିଣ ଭାରତର ଅନ୍ୟୁନ 50 ଜଣ ସଙ୍ଗୀତଜ୍ଞଙ୍କର, ପୁରାତନ ସଙ୍ଗୀତଜ୍ଞ ମାନଙ୍କର ସିଡି କରିକି ପୁରୁଣା ରେକର୍ଡିଂ ଗୁଡାକୁ କାଢିକି ତାକୁ ଉନ୍ମୋଚନ କରିଦେଇଛି ଲୋକଙ୍କୁ ଉପଲବ୍ଧ। ଓଡିଶାରେ ଯୋଉ ପୁରୁଣା ଥିଲେ, ଧରନ୍ତୁ ବାଣୀକଣ୍ଠ ନିମାଇ ହରିଚନ୍ଦନ, ଆଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ତାରିଣୀ ଚରଣ ପାତ୍ର, ସିଙ୍ଗାରୀ ଶ୍ୟାମ ସୁନ୍ଦରକର, ଏମାନଙ୍କର ଗୋଟେ ବିଧିବଦ୍ଧ ସଂକଳନ ହେଇ ସଂରକ୍ଷଣ କରିବା ଏ ଦିଗରେ କାହାର ନଜର ନାହିଁ। ମାନେ ସେଇ ତତ୍ପରତାରେ ଏ କାମଟା କରାହଉନି, ଏଗୁଡା ନଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଯିବ। ନଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଗଲେ ଆମର ଗୀତ ବୁଡିଲାନି। ସିଙ୍ଗାରୀ ସାର୍ ଗୋଟେ 500 ବର୍ଷ ଆଗ ଗୀତ ରେକର୍ଡିଂ ରେ ଗାଇଥିବେ, ସେ ରେକର୍ଡିଂ ଟା ନଷ୍ଟ କରିଦବ, 500 ବର୍ଷ ତଳର ଜିନିଷଟା ବୁଡିଗଲା। ଓ 1500 ମସିହାରୁ 1960 ଯାଏଁ ଆସିଲା, ସେଠି ତାକୁ ମାରିଦେଲେ। ଏଇଟାକୁ କୁହାଯାଏ ହତ୍ୟା କରାଯାଇଛି ବିଧିବଦ୍ଧ। ହତ୍ୟା ଗୋଟେ କଡା ଶବ୍ଦ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଏଇଟା ହତ୍ୟା ହିଁ କରାଯାଇଛି, ତଣ୍ଟି ଚିପିକି ହତ୍ୟା କଲା ସଦୃଶ କାମ ଏଇଟା କୋଉଠି କରାହେଇନି ନା। ଯୋଉଠି ହେଇଯାଇଛି ସେଟା ଖରାପ ବୋଲି ମୁଁ କହୁନି, ଭଲ ତାଙ୍କର ବି ରହୁ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଏଠି ନ ରହିବାର ତାତ୍ପର୍ଯ୍ୟ କଣ? ଏ ଭେଦଭାବ କାହିଁକି ହଉଛି? ଆମର ଗୋଟେ ଜାତୀୟ ସ୍ତରୀୟ ଫେଷ୍ଟିଭାଲ ହଉଛି ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀୟ ସଙ୍ଗୀତ ମହୋତ୍ସବ, सेठी आसीबे उत्तर भारतर एक्स नंबर ऑफ पीपल दक्षिण भारतर एक्स नंबर ऑफ पीपल ओडिसी संगीतर 2 जण ना को जिबे धरंतु एटा मध्ये होउची एटा काहेकि होउची एटा तो हवा कथा नहीं एपरिक पूर्व काल रे दक्षिण भारतीय माने आवेदन करछन्ति जे हमको अबेला होउची उत्तर भारत एटा मध्ये आवेदन नहीं छी पूर्व दिल्ली रे तेणु आपण भाबନ୍ତୁ कर्णाटक कौन छोट परंपरा न कर्णाटक 4टा राज्य हमरो ओडिसा रे मध्ये जदि हम देखिबा मेदिनीपुर श्रीकाकुल से अंचल गुडा मिसेबा मंजुषा जलंतर तरला से पूरा खांटी अद्यावधि सिटी बोला होउची सेटा उसिना विच्छिन्न कर दिया हेची किंतु अद्यावधि जो छोटिया मॉडर्न ओडिसा रे मानचित्र भितरे लोक संख्या कोन से सदृश से 4टा राज्य की तांको बेला कर दैछन्ति से माने फाइट करछन्ति फाइट करिछन्ति इतिहास तेणुकरी एगुड़ा सब माने एटा हमर किछि उणा ए सब किछि न एटा सब
प्रतीक वर्तमान विच्छिन्नांचल मु कहूची पूर्व पश्चिम दक्षिण सॉरी उत्तर पश्चिम एवं दक्षिण तीन अंचल ओडिसी रो कंडीशन कोन माने
बुढ़ा माने अछन्ति गाउछन गोपाल कृष्ण गीत बुलाउची श्रीकाकुलम जिल्ला रे एबे बुलाउची
आउता
आर्टिस्ट मान को इनवाइट करा होची बसंत पंचमी हेले कि दोल पूर्णिमा हेले गाँ गुडा कुसंती एबे तरलागड़ रे एबे भी ओडिया साइड रे ओडिया लोक अछन दैट इज इन आंध्र तरला कोर एरिया हमर तारिणी सर से तरला टिकिले ए सब अंचल रे 1940 50 रे संग्रह करछन्ती बुली बुली काई से टाइम रे रिसर्च काम बहुत कम लोक एटा गोटे वेस्टर्न रिसर्च मेथड ना जो जीवा साइंटिफिक कलेक्शन करबा ए रिसर्च मेथड ता सेतबेले बहुत क्वचित लोक इंग्रजी पढुतले क्वचित लोक नॉन ओडिया लिटरेचर पढुतले ए से फेज रे से जो कलेक्शन करछन जा भाग्यर कथा नले से जगह गीत मिलन से गीत से अंचल जे ओडिया संस्कृति रे बुडी किथिला तार शेष संतक तरलार गीत हमें भी गाउछु ना ए भलिया तेणु पारला खेमुंडी गोटे एते प्रभावशाली जगह पारला खेमुंडी रो आपण 5 मिनिट जिवे से पुराना पाटना को रिनेम कर देकी पथ पाटना कर देछन्ती वर्तमान से हमर पॉलिटिकल बॉर्डर रे हमर किछ कहबार नै आमे कहूछु सेटा गलाणी आंध्र गलाणी कोन करबा आमे कोन पॉलिटिकल बॉर्डर को रिडिफाइन करबे बट आंध्र गवर्नमेंट इज सपोज्ड टू सपोर्ट द लोकल ट्रेडिशन ईच गवर्नमेंट एवं मनकर आंध्र रे सीमांचल कलिंग स्थापत्य मंदिर तार कोन प्रिजर्वेशन हबन तार प्रिजर्वेशन त कोनी हबो ना सरकार ए दृष्टि निरपेक्ष हवा कथा किंतु नुह फैक्ट टाइला निरपेक्ष नुह अन्य मान जदि निरपेक्ष नुहंती ताले हमकु सजा गबा पड़ियो हमर एटी कोइ जीवो ओडिसी गीत गाइले ही स्कूल रे तमु रखा जीवो जदि नॉर्थ इंडिया रे हिंदुस्तानी को दिया होची 60% स्लॉट अन्य गुडा को 40% दैट इज फेयर सेटा किछि भूल कथा नुह तांको परंपरा को से माने सपोर्ट करियो स्वाभाविक कथा नॉर्थ इंडिया रे कोन मु कहबी ओडिया रे बही काढ ओडिया रे पाठ्यक्रम हबो बोली ओडिसा रे ओडिया रे हबो ओडिसा रे जेमति ओडिया रे हबो बर्तमान सेठी जोटा 40 ला 80 60 करले तो सेटा हिसाब समान हबो नले कोन माने एटा गोटे प्रतिशत न एटा ला आर्टिस्ट मान को स्लॉट कोटे मिलबा हमें जदि एटी 50 50 नीति करबा हमें समस्त को समदृष्टि देखिबा ताले हमें बुडी जिबा
एटा सर्वाइवल एक्सटिंक्ट माने जदि निजे केमति बंचिबो भाबिबो सेटा ता भाबिबा हक संपूर्ण तमर अछि तबे उत्तर रे तमे एबे जस्ट मेदिनीपुर कथा कहउतले तेणु मु पचारछि माने ठीक अछि बहुत कम लोक अछन त मु कहि परिबी पॉलिटिक्स छाडी कि कोहा जाय कि ओडिसी म्यूजिक को कदरत करिवारे हम उत्तरस्थ राज्यर भूमिका अल्प किछि परिमाण रे अछि विशेष करी ओडिसी नाचरे जो संगीत व्यवहार होउची हम उत्तर पड़ोसी मानक द्वारा ता विषय
डॉक्यूमेंटेड एटा सबुठी हुए एटा उत्तर भारत रे भी दिने हेतिबो कथक रे भी दिने हेतिबो पंकज सर पार्टी करथिले काहे अन ओडिया गीत व्यवहार होछ तेनु कोन की रक्षणशील लोक थांती एवं अरक्षणशील प्रयोगात्मक अति करिवा लोक प्रयोग मध्ये अछि गोटे परंपरा परिधिर प्रयोग परंपरा बहिर्भूत प्रयोग मु कहूची गोटे थांती पूरा खांटी पूरा कंजर्वेटिव लोक गोटे लिबराल थांती वर्तमान से दीटा एंड रहिले तो वर्तमान से दीटा एंड रहू नाही और कथा अन्य अंचल अपेक्षा ओडिसा रे भी कंजर्वेटिव लोक अछंती
अछि ओडिया ट्रेडिशन नॉट ओनली संगीत रहेला सबुथिरे प्यूरिस्टनेस ता बहुत सदर्पे विद्यमान बोधे सेहिति पई एते अबहळा सत्य मध्ये कोडी ना कोडी बंचिछि तबे
अन्य जगह रे बंची नाही ना बहुत जगह रे बुडी जाईछि एबडी संगीत धारा गुडा जो से पांचाली कहउछंती पांचाल कहले नेपाल एरिया ना नेपाल एरिया कहले कोन नेपाल हमर बिहार बौद्ध बिहार एरिया से एरिया गोटे अति समृद्ध संगीत थिबो काहेकि तांकर स्थापत्य एवं तांकर चित्रकला जना पडुची एवं तांकर भी जा टिका अवशिष्ट संगीत अछि तो जना पडुची अति उच्चांग रुचिर तांकर संगीत थिला किंतु ताकू कोन पृष्ठपोषण ताकू कोन भारत सरकार पृष्ठपोषण करूची के जाने कोठी गोटे खंडे अधे किंतु ए जो इन योर फेस जेमती दुईटा को प्रचार करा जाउची जेमती इन योर फेस हिंदी लैंग्वेज को प्रमोट करा जाउची सब जिनस एटा किसी एते कष्ट नुह बुझिबा धरते आपण भुवनेश्वर रे थिबा केतेक अनुष्ठान रो कैंपस को जिबे आपण ओडिया भाषा रे अक्षरटे पाइबेनी एपरि कि ए जगह रे गाड़ी रखंतु बोली भी पाइबेनी
सेटा बोधे हुए एथरो से मु जोठु मोर कॉलेज पढिची आईटीआर मु ना भी देनी जीबी तो मो बैच माने मु कहूची हम 2013 पास आउट बैच से बैच रे बोधे हुए जदि 1000 पिलारु 600 पिला ओडिया थिबे एवं सेही 600 रु गोटे कंफर्टेबली ओडिया कहबा पिला बोधे हुए 200 थिबे आउ 400 माने सेते बेले गोटे भाषा मरि जे केते बेले दी प्रकार रे गोटे हला ताको एते क्लिष्ट कर दियो जे ताको अन्य के कथा हबा को से भाषा रे डरिबे ताको अति प्यूरिस्ट फॉर्म रे रखो किंबा ताको अति गोटे निम्न श्रेणी कर दियो कि माने ए भाषा रे की कथा होची बोली बोधे हुए ओडिया रो अवस्था वर्तन सेही दीटा को गति करछु
हमर किंतु पारिवारिक स्तर रे जेमिति मो आई मते गीत शिखैतिले से भली जे वर्तमान सब घरे आउ होउची बोली म भाबु केतरा अंचल रे होउची ओडिसा रे केतरा अंचल रे से कल्चर एबे भी अछि ओठी होनी पुरी रे अछि पुरी रे एबे भी अति छोट पिला माने अति आनंद रे मल्लीमाळ बेकरे पके कि चंदन बेले गीत गाई कि जानती से जो से प्रेमटा सब जगह रे काई नाही सब जगह थिला गोटे दिन रे सेटा सब सेटा हमर अभाव सेटा अन्य लोक मानकर अछि किंतु एटा फैमिली स्पेस रा एटा पर्सनल स्पेस रा कथा एटा पब्लिक स्पेस रा कथा एटा सरकार दायी न कि सरकार किछि करि परिबनी कि क्लासिकल हबारे यार किछि रोल न एटा पर्सनल स्पेस कथा
करेक्ट करेक्ट आउ एबे वर्तमान रो पॉलिटिक्स जहा एठी राजा को नहीं प्रजा नुहे प्रजा को नहीं राजा जो दिन प्रजा चाहिबो से सब माने जहा तुमको दरकार सब मिलिबो जदी टंकी के चावल जो गवर्नमेंट दे परछि तापे क्लासिकल स्टेटस गुडी जोगड़ करिया केते बड़ कथा
राज्य सरकार तत्पर राज्य सरकार माने लास्ट 10-15 इयर्स हैला हैज बीन क्वाइट एक्टिव आ मुख्यमंत्री भी बहुत थोड़ा पटेचंती से राजारानी संगीत महोत्सव होउची किंतु आउरी हवा कथा गोटे राजारानी संगीत महोत्सव होउची जातीय स्तर रो संगीत महोत्सव जदि गोटे हेतंता जयदेव संगीत महोत्सव गोटे कवि सूर्य संगीत महोत्सव 10टा हेतंता कोन अछि 10टा होउनी कि अन्य जगह दे प्राइवेट उद्यम गुडा होउची हमरा बड़ बड़ प्राइवेट कॉर्पोरेशन गुडा को स्पॉन्सर करचंती नॉर्थ इंडिया रो साउथ इंडिया रो आपण देखिबे आपण जिबे म्यूजिक एकेडमी प्रख्यात मद्रास म्यूजिक एकेडमी एडे आपण जिबे गोटे अति माने गोटे थिबो 40 रो सिटिंग थिबो दुईटा फ्लोर रे पूरा एयर कंडीशन वर्ल्ड क्लास एम्फी थिएटर रे कर्नाटक संगीत बोला से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर टा कोन लोक करिवे जेटा सरकार करिवो ना नले प्राइवेट संस्था करिवे कॉर्पोरेशन करिवे सेही स्तर रो काम सेगुडा सब पूर्व रो हे गलानी से जगह अवश्य तार मध्य रूट रे पुणी अछि जे तांकर सिटी कैपिटल थिला सिटी प्रोत्साहन दिया होतिला से समय रे ओडिसा रे कैपिटल करानले दी फाड़ कराला ए माने राज्य पय लड़िले भाषा पय लड़ सेटा सब रिलेटेड किंतु वर्तमान तो करा जाय परिबो ना वर्तमान कोन
मो नेक्स्ट आउ कार भी सुनील सर प्रीता ने किसी क्वेश्चन अछि पचारंदु मोर तो मु आउरी जोडे तीनटा रखी छी
हरिवने
मु पचार दिया गोटे क्वेश्चन खाली दीटा पचारिबी दीटा निहाती पचारे अछि माने गोटे हला ओडिसी लेखार भविष्यत कोन माने ताको आउ टिके गरम करिया को जदि मु पचारिबी 200 वर्ष तळे जो भलिया लेखा हितला जो लेखा को नि हम गर्व करते आमे जदि आज जदि बाहर का आगे जो माने बुझी भी न परंतु से आमे कहूची हमर एठी रामायण लेखा हिची बरे आरंभ होई कि आदि अक्षर रे आमे जदि कहूचे हमर एठी एमिति लेखा हिची जोथरे कि जाको तमे एपड़ सेपड़ करी पढिले तार 10टा भावार्थ बाहरिबो तबे वर्तमान ओडिसी लेखार भविष्यत कोन लेखुचंती मु जानि छी बहुत जण ज्योतिषा लेखु बहुत जण लेखते से मानर लेखा होउची कि नै किबा से मानर लेखा हबा पे गोटे एफर्ट होउची कि नै आ जदि होउची ताको लोकलोचन को आनिया पे कोन
हम साहित्य परंपरा की संगीत सहित अति निबिड़ भाव रे जड़ित एवं संगीतर किछि प्रायोगिक पक्ष न जानले साहित्य लेखि परिबनी पुरातन शैली किछि नले छंद रागताल मिनिमम ज्ञानटा दरकार साहित्य को बहुत प्रोत्साहन मिले बहुत आग्रह ओडिसा
किंतु आमे जदि देखिबा आज जेते माने जदि 100 जण लिखुछंती 100 जण तो बोधे 19 जण मुक्त छंदरे लिखुछंती
ना मुक्त छंद जे हमर जो 1880 बेलरु जो साहित्य को गोटे प्रोएक्टिव जो स्तर सपोर्ट मिलछि अति उच्च स्तर सपोर्ट मिलछि साहित्य पई लोक सब दुनिया व्यवस्था कर दैछंती आर्थिक अनुदान एवं कार्य रे अनुदान साहित्य पई पदक्षेप गुडा को 19 मसिया पूर्वरु भी हम देखि परिवार लोक करथुले
नेते
बहुत
साहित्य
लोक बहुत अधिक लोक करथुले म्यूजिक को कम लोक करथुले चित्र पट्टचित्र को केतरा लोक 1900 राइटिंग रे हम देखिया केतरा लोक म्यूजिक विषय लिखछंती केतरा लोक साहित्य विषय लिखछंती केतरा चित्र सब बेले साहित्यटा मेजॉरिटी रहइबो साहित्यटा गोटे एक्सेसिबल जिंस ना साहित्यटा गोटे एकरे सुलभ मूल्य रे पुस्तक उपलब्ध हेबा आउ साहित्यर कोन गोटे वर्णना करबा क्लास अछंती पाला रे आपण जिबे आपण सुनिबे बुझिबे से जिंसटा से कल्चरटा मेंटेन हेछि हमर प्रिजर्व कराइछि से कल्चरटा से
किंतु
जिंसटा
साहित्य को जो जो शास्त्रीय मर्यादा रे लिखा जिया कथा सब
वर्तमान मध्ये लिखुचंती बड़ सुंदर रचना लिखुचंती वयस्क मान लिखुचंती युव वर्ग भी लिखुचंती बहुत भल रचना होछि नुआ नुआ शैली रचना भी होछि एपरि कि व्यंग रचना भी होछि ओडिसी शैली जोटा हबा कथा जेतेबेले साइमन कमिशन आस्थिला हमर रेकॉर्डिंग अछि साइमन रिपोर्ट लेखा हजी गला हेला बजारे बिका ए जो जिटा काहे गले मुरली फुंका एटा एठी आसुछि जेतु एटा लेखा हैला समय ओडिसा आ गीत किछि नथिला जहार पैरोडी करिवे कवि लक्ष्मीकांत महापात्र गुड़ाए गीतर पैरोडी कर पूरा ओडिसी माने पूरा बोला है पूरा आद्य नियम रक्षा करी छंद नियम रक्षा करी राग नियम रक्षा करी साहित्य मध्य एजुकेशन टा बहुत आग्रह गला टेक्स्ट बुक बहुत आग्रह गला सिलेबस गला एग्जाम गला अपॉइंटमेंट पुनी से चक्रटा
सेटा सत कथा कारण स्कूल ले हम सब ओडिया पढिछे किंतु स्कूल ले ओडिसी संगीत की पढिछि कि सेटा निज व्यक्तिगत भाबे जदी का बापा मां सुनुथिले कि का घरे बाजुथिला अलग कथा मोर शेष प्रश्न
स्कूल रे भी गोटे गोटे भल शिक्षक गोटे गोटे अंचल रे बहुत
सेटा दैवात सेटा भाग्य बळ रे सेटा गोटे माने इंस्टीट्यूशन
एफर्ट सेटा इंस्टीट्यूट पकेरु किछि सपोर्ट
प्रोसेस गोटे नुहे करेक्ट मोर शेष प्रश्न रहइबो एटा गोटे पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस रु मु कहूची मु 6 वर्ष तळे तळे बेंगलोर रे थिली गोटे क्रॉस कल्चर पीजी रे रहउथिली मोर सेठी नॉर्थ इंडियन भी रहउथिले तमिलियन रहउथिले कन्नाडिगास भी रहउथिले मु से माने ओब्वियसली आमे जो जानचे लाउड स्पीकर लगे कि निज गीत प्रचार करिवा सब माने गीत से माने बजेबोती निज गीत बजेबे तो जेतेबेले मो पाखरे पैसा हला मु स्पीकर किनिली मु प्रथम भाबिली को गीत बजेबी कारण नुवा गीत किछि एमते नय जे मु नुवा फिल्म गीत सुनेनी बहुत सुने किंतु मते डर लागला एमाने कहबे एटा तो हम भाषार कॉपी हिची तेणु मु बजेइतिली मोर मने अछि मल्लीमाला श्यामକୁ देबी किंतु माने क्षोभर कथा जने माने एडा अन्याय कथा किंतु आसी कहले एटा तो गोटे बॉलीवुड गीतर कॉपी जोड़ा ओलोटा बेसिकली सी कहले पिया तो से नेना लागेरु मल्लीमाला श्यामକୁ देबी कॉपी बोली जोटा कि नुहे माने मल्लीमाला श्यामକୁ देबी हम जानू जे 200-300 वर्ष पुराना गीत तो एई जो अवेयरनेस क्रिएशन पे व्यक्तिगत स्तर रे कि सोशल मीडिया रे जो माने काम करछथि कोन करि हो एडा म शेष प्रश्न
युवा वर्ग हमर रील कला बेले केतरा पिला तेलुगु गीत पकोछन्ती केतरा पिला ओडिया गीत पकोछन्ती से भीतर कोन ओडिसी गीत पको नाही
तो नाहंती किंतु
आउतरे म देखुछि रील रे सब कर्नाटिक पकोछन्ती कर्नाटिक फ्यूजन होछि से आईपैड रे कर्नाटिक बजा होछि माने म प्रशंसा करि कहउछि भलो कथा न कोन करा एबे गोटे फिल्म होबो एबे हमर जो हैला से कोन से अमेज़न प्राइम रे गोटे वेब सीरीज है नथिला हिंदुस्तानी म्यूजिक बंदिश पंडित जो हितला एबे आपण देखिबे बॉलीवुड रो जो पीरियड फिल्म रे गोटे कथक सीन थिबो कथक न चाहतो ठुमरी बोलाउतो से काई हमर सेटा 1960 70 जाय फिल्म रे थिला मला जन रे भरी हिची ओडिसी गीत सीता विवाह आरंभ रु शेष जाय ओडिसी गीत श्री जगन्नाथ ललिता सब काली बाबू जोथरे इन्वॉल्व पूरा ओडिसी इन्फ्लुएंस काहे से जुगर थिएटर टा ओडिसी गीत थिला जे थिएटर जो परंपरा रसला से पुनी ओडिसी गीत परंपरा
एबे का म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर जने जन सहित सौभाग्यवश कि दुर्भाग्यवश मुझे कथा हिची
पॉपुलर मीडिया रे कल्चरल रिफ्लेक्शन नाही
आउ प्रॉब्लम है कि कर्नाटिक किंबा हिंदुस्तानी को निजर बोली मानि सरछंदी
स्टाइल तो गाउचंती यार
हां हां
से हिंदुस्तानी रो भी आवरी विदेशी से सूफी स्टाइल रे बोला होची वर्तमान सूफी
करेक्ट
रॉक स्टाइल रे बोला होची पॉप स्टाइल रे मु निंदा करूनी मु कोसी निजटा रखी कि आउ जोटा करछ कर
करेक्ट करेक्ट
निजटा तो टोटली आदो मूलर नाही गोटे हसिया कथा नहीं एटा तमे गोटे फिल्म करिवो जे कोनोसी अंचल रे तमे गोटे बेसिक जिंसटा एटा स्टैंडर्ड जिंसटा किंतु कथा हैला से सेटार प्रॉब्लम कोठी से जो लोकटा दउनी से निजे केबे ता घरे सुनिनी तने से भाबचे एटा गोटे
प्रत्येक प्रत्येक मोटा सजेशन दवा पे चाहूची तमे किसी कॉपीराइट प्रोटेक्टेड ओडिसी गीत बोली ताको आमे ये कर परिबे कि ऑफर कर परिबे कि जे जदी कोन सी व्यक्ति चाहउचंती याको थोड़े बैकग्राउंड म्यूजिक सार व्यवहार करे पे
पब्लिक डोमेन रे यूट्यूब रे अन्यून 300 उपरे ओडिसी गीत रेकॉर्डिंग अछि से भी पूर्वकालीय पंडित मान द्वारा बालकृष्ण सर काशी सर मार्कंड सर सब लीडिंग आर्टिस्ट
ओडिया मेलोडी जोटा तमे कहउतिलो मते मु त
ओडिया मेलोडी ग्रामफोन मु सेटा कहउनी आ गोटे ओडिसी म्यूजिक ओडिसी संगीत अकाउंट अछि गोटे देखिए मु लिंक पठे देबी
तम अकाउंट रे जय जगन्नाथ श्री जगन्नाथ राइट जोटा तम
मु गाइबा मु सेटा कहउनी मु कहउची गोटे ओडिसी संगीत यूट्यूब चैनल अछि सेतिरे प्राय 300 खंड पुराना रेडियो रेकॉर्डिंग ओडिसी गीत अछि रेडियो रे बहुत रेकॉर्ड हेछि सेगुडा सब आपण व्यवहार करबे एवं सेगुडा को मध्य केमि
अच्छा प्रत्येक हमर गोटे यूट्यूब सॉरी व्हाट्सएप रो गोटे ग्रुप अछि कलिंग इतिहास ग्रुप अच्छा मु भाबुची मु तुम नाटा सेत्र ऐड कर देबी तो एटलीस्ट इफ यू डोंट फील लाइक गोटे सप्ताह पर्यंत हम संग रही कि जहां माने व्हाटएवर यू फील लाइक शेयरिंग जदि से ग्रुप रे शेयर करिपो इट वुड गो टू अ वाइडर ऑडियंस आफ्टर दैट इफ यू फील यू कैन माने कैरी ऑन और यू कैन लीव द ग्रुप ठीक अछि चलिबो ओके थैंक यू
मु भाबुची गत 3-4-5 वर्ष रे विशेष करी कोरोना परे गुडे गीत सब अपलोड हे जाइछि माने जो मानकर भी प्राइवेट कलेक्शन सब रेकॉर्डिंग थिला से सब अपलोड कर दे जंती नेट कहीं बहुत लोक चली गले तांका स्मृति रे तांकर सब कलेक्शन गुडा सब रेकॉर्ड कराई गले एटा गोटे भलो कथा टी हेछि बहुत डिजिटाइज हे गेला
प्रतीक तम चैनल रे गुडाई गीत मते लागुची अगर थिला बोदेबे ताको प्राइवेट करछो किबा
मोर 15-20 टी 15-20 कण बेसी
आउ एक्चुअली मु खोजुथली एबे किछ दिन तळे विप्र सिंह चौधरी से मते मिललानी सेति में पुछारछु अछि
विप्र सिंह रखितली बोदे विप्र सिंह त थिबो
हो आमे मु न मिलले पुनी आथरे मेसेज करबी एनीवे आज सभा सरिया पूर्व मु वोट ऑफ थैंक्स देबी किंतु नॉर्मली वोट ऑफ थैंक्स रे सरे मु किंतु अनुरोध रहबो तापरे गोटे गीत गाई आमे माने सुनी आमे सभा सांग करबा जो गीत विषय रे आस्तोष मिश्र आज्ञा कहउतले जोटा कि माने हम समस्त अति प्रिय तम कंठरू मथुरा मंगल जय गोविंद गोकुल सुंदर गाइबा तबे ता पूर्वरु
गीत गोविंद प्रथा
ठीक 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 आवरी बढ़िया सुंदर अति सुंदर तबे आज बोधे हुए कलिंग हिस्ट्री रो कलिंग इतिहास रो गोटे दीर्घतम एपिसोड हमें रेकॉर्ड करछि किंतु दीर्घतम किंतु बोरिंग नुहे कि कोनोसी समय खापचडा नुहे जे भी मु आत्मविश्वास सहित कहबी यूट्यूब रे जेटा देखिबो से अधार छाडी के जीवनी कोठी हमें गुल्ली घटी की गप करले सबुठी तथ्यात्मक विषय रे बहुत कथा हिचे जो श्रोता बंधु किंबा दर्शक बंधु मैंने सहित जोड़ी रहिले रविवार सायंकाल समस्त को अनेक अनेक धन्यवाद शेष प्रतीक तुमको अनेक अनेक धन्यवाद आम आशा करूँ आगु को आहरी भी तुम सुनिबु ओडिसी रो
बहुत यशस्वी हुआ बहुत आग को जाओ एमती आग को बढ़ो था हमर ओडिसा रो माने सांस्कृतिक इतिहास को बहुत धन्यवाद
आपन आशीर्वाद थाउ
सब बेले से महाप्रभु का आशीर्वाद थाउ सब बेले तुम ऊपर
शेष करबा गोटे जेमती प्रतीक कहले ओडिसा रो गर्व जयदेव कृत गीत गोविंद रो गोटे पद
देवळ प्रथम भणती पदटा गाई दउ से तो आरंभ पदटी गाई कि भणती न गाइले हमर विरक्त होंते हमर बड़ माने श्री जय देव कवेरी हरे श्री जय देव कवे इदं कुरुते मुदं मंगलं गीतं हरिमंगलं गीतं जय जय देव हरे हरि जय जय देव राधे कृष्ण हरि गोविंद गोपाल हरि वसुदेव बाल भजनंद दुलाल जय जय देव हरे ଆମର ପାରମ୍ପରିକ ମଙ୍ଗଳ ଗୀତ।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद प्रतीक, धन्यवाद सब सांग।